You ready? I don't know what I'm doing.
Let me turn the power on.
Oh yeah, device.
Okay, practice. Thank you. Welcome. Today's May 28th. Welcome. Today's May 28th, 2024, and it is 3:15 p.m. We are convened as the Provo City School District Board of Education. We are meeting at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. We'll begin with a roll call. Do I start? I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, you start.
I'm Gina Hales, and I am not the president. I am just a board member.
Melanie Hall, board member.
What is just a board member?
Meg Van Wagenen, board member.
Is she going or?
I don't think Rebecca's on
okay.
yet.
Will Widener, student member.
Terry McCabe, board member.
Devin Daly, business administrator.
Wendy Dow, superintendent.
Thank you. We may have our board president and vice president we want to excuse. They are both off doing some different things that needed to be tended to. And we may have our board president, Rebecca Nielsen, join us later via Zoom. And so we will, if she does that, we'll let everybody know. Is there a motion to convene the study session?
I move we convene the study session.
Thank you. Motion made by board member Van Wagenen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by board member Boyce. Now, it's testing my knowledge of your last names. We are now in study session. All right, now I gotta skip down here. All right, so first up on our agenda is our board handbook training that board member Van Wagenen will be doing.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to make this quick. So today we're going to talk about agenda development. So the process of putting together our board meeting agendas is a collaborative process between the board president, so president, vice president, and the superintendent. And any board member can request that a topic be put on the agenda. So one board member can contact board leadership and say, this is something I'm interested in, and they'll see if, they'll put it in their list. But also, if 3 board members combined would like to see something on the agenda, that kind of set priority, and that will be put on the agenda as soon as it can be. So, and then it does say here in January and February, the board may choose to make a list of topics that we want to discuss in further depth, and then those would be discussed in our study sessions, our 4th Tuesday study sessions. As I'm reading this, I am like, more and more are, it's harder to differentiate between our 2 different board meetings because they're just so packed, which is great.
They used to be very different.
Okay.
They used to be very different where one was actually in the morning, even at 7 a.m. to like 9, like it was very short and there was no business meeting. So like it's very different from where it used to be.
I think there's just we're doing lots of work.
Terry can take credit for that.
Yeah, that's right.
Or the condemnation.
No, and I don't bring that up to point a finger. I think that's just the process of the work that needs to be done, and we have our agendas have been full for the last little bit. But something that's starting when I started on the board, I do know our board leadership has started like a spreadsheet where we can put in kind of to keep a record of items that we would like to discuss at some time, and then on that sheet, other board members can chime in and say, oh, I second that, I third that, and then we're able to say, okay, there's 3 people who would like to see this on the agenda. So, question?
I was just thinking about our student board members, like,
oh, yes.
Do you feel like if there have been times when you thought it would be good to discuss something in a board meeting but not clear how to get that on an agenda, or?
Because we have the Student Advisory Council and board student members control that agenda, it's been a really easy way to get the board aware of things. And at the beginning, Gina was very clear, if we do want something to add, we just go through her and she could put it on for us if it was appropriate for a meeting.
That's a great question.
And that would be considered 3, Will, Max, and Gina, right?
Well, I think it needs to be actual elected board members would be my preference, but I'm hoping that anything that you would bring up would be that. And if there wasn't enough, then we could have a discussion about what we needed to do to get that on the agenda. I'm not the board president, so I just want to reiterate.
This is actually a great topic to go over without either of our leaders.
That's right. How would we like to change the process while they're gone? I'm just kidding.
Well, and these are all things that have changed.
Yeah.
For, after the board handbook was made.
Which I appreciate, like I was referencing when I started on the board, I think there was this kind of like there maybe needs to be a better process to make sure everyone's being heard and ideas are being recorded in a way that we remember that has been requested, which I appreciate, kind of that ability to say, okay, this process is maybe a little outdated, you know, how can we make it more efficient and more effective as a board? So.
Good. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Board Member Van Wagenen. All right, the next up we have Franklin Elementary update and CSI plan approval, and that is, I don't know.
Jared.
Jared.
And Jason.
And Jason. And you have, I'm supposed to tell you how long you have. You have 10 minutes until, I don't know how long. Do the math. 3:30, yes.
Hold on, Jason.
3:30, here we go.
We've asked Principal Jason Benson to come and visit with you. And in previous meetings, you've had a chance to review the school improvement plan efforts for Franklin Elementary. And incorporated into those are the plans to address the CSI plan that's also required by the state. We've asked Jason to come join us today to be able to share with you 2 specific goals that they have been working towards over the past year and give you an opportunity to ask any additional questions. But keep in mind that that school improvement plan that you approved in April also incorporated their plans to move forward with the CSI, the Comprehensive School Improvement Efforts. So, Jason, go ahead.
Okay, great. Excited to be here. I'm going to stand over here. We were at Provo Beach today with our student council, and I forgot my shoes. So I'm in my flip-flops, so don't
I didn't even notice.
I know.
You're
I
good.
walked really quietly.
You're good.
My flip-flops is great. So, hey,
Feet.
I'm excited to be here. Talk about Franklin. I know I just have a few minutes to talk about a year that has been intense, worthwhile, discouraging at times, I guess you could say. I mean, it's just, Franklin is an amazing school. We worked hard, and I just want to tell the board thanks, Wendy thanks, me, Michelle, Jared, everybody in here who's been at our school, been advocating, because we continue to work, continue to strive, and we appreciate it. So it's been so nice having an assistant principal and a full-time coach. I mean, they've already had a huge impact on these 2 goals right here that we're going to talk about. So I want you to know that thank you for investing, because it was nice that we had those supports even before anybody else did. Okay, so the 2 big goals that we had were increase our ELA and math proficiencies by 7%. Okay, and then it just gave a few different things, right? Doing classroom observations, looking and using our PLC agendas, okay, progress monitoring and things like that. Okay, the first of the year started off a little rough because we had some pretty difficult behavior students. Okay, and as you guys know, sometimes that kind of kicks you in the butt a little bit, right, as you're running from here and there. So it was really good feedback when the consultants came the first time, because we hadn't gotten into a good routine of that, because it just seemed like we were having fires all the time. And I appreciate Jared coming up and just being like, hey, he goes, I need you to be in your classrooms an hour or 2 every day. And so it was great just to, I appreciated that feedback, and it wasn't like I was like, crap, I can't. Sometimes it's just like, how do we make that work? And so with the assistant principal and with our instructional coach, we've been able to come up with a much more effective system. Okay, and then with our agenda, we realized that it wasn't giving us the data that we wanted. Okay, I mean, our agenda is something that was created 2 years ago by teachers, and it was good. I mean, it went through the questions, you know, DuPour's questions and all those things, but the data wasn't there. Okay, so we sat down and we actually redid our agendas, which was useful, but our teachers are still kind of getting used to that. Okay, and so the way that we created that is that language arts is 1 week, then we do math and behaviors the next week, then we go back to language arts, and then the following week math and behaviors. Behaviors are consistently a little bit higher at Franklin, and that can be due to a number of things and experience of teachers, you know, different things like that. But it's really helped us to be able to use like educators' handbooks and stuff like that to really kind of narrow down on that. Okay, so it's been good. We meet every Monday after our we have an administrative meeting at 9:30, and then the admin team, we review the agendas, we see kind of what questions they are, and then we can give feedback on that. That's been very helpful just to kind of see those needs. That's been helpful to get that up and going. One of the things that we realized is as teachers tried to administer the benchmarks, because that was part of this in language arts and math, we really didn't know how to use the data effectively. And that's just true. You give it, and then it's like, okay, here's this, now what do we do? All right, and so it's been good just to be able to say, how do we really meet those needs of those teachers, and how do you use that data effectively? And it's really made us pause and say, how do we use that data effectively? Because if it's correlated, right, and I'm not sure if, can I say it's correlated to, no, okay.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, I can say it, but
You can
is
say
it,
whatever
right?
you want.
But if we're giving that, is it really going to help us know, are the kids going to be successful on the end of the year rise, right? And so we want to make sure that the data we're using is just much more effective on that. Okay, and then just progress monitoring. We realized through this year is that some teachers are much more consistent than others, right? And so how do we just really create a systemic, and even though they've been trained, and even though they say that they're doing it effectively, how do we support them as an administrative team in making sure that they really are tracking, you know, the reds every week, the yellows every few, and follow that consistently. So looking at the data, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not, we were a little disappointed in it. And I don't know how else to say that. We did work hard. I mean, we did the benchmarks. Then for the first time, like, somebody came up and there's this little 6th grade girl that was just bawling in the bathroom. And I was like, what the heck's going on? She goes, I didn't get a 3 on my RISE test. And that's like a miracle, Franklin, just so you know. So that motivation's coming, but as we, systemic change is a little hard, but we're really looking forward to this year. Now that we've got Lance, Heidi, everything kind of in place, you know. Brenda, we are having a little bit more teacher turnover, just so you guys know. Okay, there'll be 5 teachers that we've had to replace. 1 went to be a coach, 2 left teaching, 1's having a baby, different things like that. So we've been able to hire some really good people, but once again, it's kind of that revolving door. So, but we love Franklin. We're excited. The results were not what we hoped, but it'll give us a chance to be able to really look at that and say, okay, we're gonna go back to the basics. We also realized, and technology is great, but sometimes there was an how do I say this, an overuse, or, you know, an over reliance, dependence on that, of saying, I'm gonna work with you 3 right here, and then you guys go, you know, you have like these 3 things. And we realized that's not the most effective, and as you work with teachers, that's kind of hard because they're like, well, what do I do now? So that's where the summer's going to come in. So classroom observations were fantastic and great because you were really able to see good things going on, but you're able to realize, okay, what are the systemic changes going on? So we're hopeful, we're excited, glad to be here. Okay, questions that you may have or insights, Jared or Michelle, anything you guys want
Are
to say?
these the goals that were changed in the CSI meeting
Yes.
in January?
Yeah. So just so everybody's aware, we had new consultants come in and they gave us much more specific feedback, which was great. And so you'll notice that our plan that was presented to you has a lot more specific goals that targets. These were very general, which is part of our frustration, and we appreciate Wendy speaking up and saying, how do you really set effective goals and come up with an effective plan if it's just
the
very...
last CSI plan wasn't as good as the new one.
Yeah, and so this one's great, and so we're going to focus on our EL students, okay, because they're not making progress, our special ed kids as well, and then just overall our economically disadvantaged little ones, which is most of our school, but those are the 3 populations that we're going to be working on to make sure that, because as we did observations, we have great teachers, but sometimes they look at our special ed kids, and I don't know if this is a problem, and they're like, as long as they're quiet and they behave, that's great, okay, and then they can go out for their instruction and they'll get it. And not that they just didn't know how to really meet those needs, and so that scaffolding and differentiation is going to be important this next year. So, okay. Any questions, thoughts? Yes?
Yeah, you were mentioning, like, you know, kind of figuring out what to do with the data. I think that is the trickiest part for all of us, right? So when a teacher does see a student yellow or red on their Acadians interim assessment, for example, like, what are some of the ideas that teacher might have? I'm curious to know.
No, that's
also,
great.
how would you communicate that? Like, are you able to communicate that to parents? Like, what does that look like?
Sure. So after each one, like in the fall, and then in the after each Acadians, we do day-to-days, and so we're able to sit down with the teachers and really go through and look. those. With our new assistant principal, we've introduced a data wall. So as you walk in, you can see all of the kids, and so they're based on color, progress, things like that. So as you walk into our conference room, it's great. You can see all of the kids, see where they're at. It's very secure. We have little drapes that kind of cover that. But then we're really able to say, okay, here's these kids, but then we can also tie it into progress and say, these were yellow, did they make progress? Or are they like red and red? So as a school, we can have much more in-depth conversations on that progress. As far as communicating with parents, we honestly, we try and do our best. Sometimes, especially at Franklin, parents are just like, we trust you. And we're like, we need you to read more. Oh, you guys are great, you know, just we can do that. And so, but for us, PLCs, and then just the progress monitoring, and really just making sure, are they making that growth, and what is the proof, right? What's that evidence in making that? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Or if
Anybody
you're-
else have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, any suggestions on that would be great too. Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. Any other comments or questions for Jason? Okay, thank you for the good
Great,
work that
thank
you're doing
you.
there, I appreciate it. All right, next up we have our construction update. This is scheduled from 3:30 to 4 p.m. and I did see Chad walk in. Is it Chad?
Yep, and Chad and Dave from DCBO will also be helping with the second part. Chad will work on, or will address the ongoing construction, and then Dave will help with the TempView update, so we can make a decision whether, or what we need to do for moving forward.
What do we do? Well, things are progressing well, overall. On all of them, so everything's in pretty good shape. A few construction, it seems like every day there's something different that's a delay, a long lead time, but the latest one we've heard on Shoreline is to get the cabinets finished, but it looks like we found an answer to it. They're going to be able to meet the deadline. So we're looking good on everything. Wasatch is going well. We had so the roof is going on. The structural steel is actually all can be completely done in the next 3 weeks. Got the roof over on kindergarten. Windows on the north and south end, so this north and south end is pretty much fully enclosed and dried in, and paint will start on the first floor next week. The cafeteria, or the kitchen, has got the decking on, so the roofing will go over to that. And actually just today we did the last, can't really see it in this image, but the last concrete pour on the building, so building concrete, so that is complete. Next one. Site progress, we got this big grand staircase connecting the 2 different levels of lots, and so all the site concrete's probably about 90% complete, other than the playground. Next one. Yeah, this is that section, mechanical room, that was just poured today, so that finishes concrete. All this masonry is topped out, and they're now going to the veneer, now that the structural masonry is all done. Next one, and there's our veneer. A little better than the gray.
It's much less like
This is the kitchen, so they're wrapping around that, going around the backside, and then just gonna move around the building. Next one. This is the first floor, pretty much done. We're gonna get the fire marshal to inspect in the next 2 weeks. Paint starts next week to start doing drop-in ceilings. Next one. Second floor, drywall is all hung. Tile should be starting in the next week or 2. Mechanical, electrical are all in good shape and pretty much done, and all on the 3rd floor. This is the 3rd floor. This is the south side. The drywall is getting started, and then they're starting to frame on the north side. Next one. This is kindergarten. As soon as they got that roof in, they already got going on the framing and the mechanical, so they're moving quick on the interiors. Any questions on Wasatch?
And just a comment on Wasatch, Chad and I have talked with Steve, so BYU called me last week to make sure that we were on schedule, because we have a hard deadline in February to be out of Wasatch, which means we have to be out a couple weeks early so we can prepare the building for some of the things we have to remove. And so far.
We're on
First of
track for that.
February or end of February?
First
of
of
February.
2025.
So, starting in August, we pay $10,000 a month for the lease costs for Wasatch, and then there is no option to extend beyond February.
So no delays.
No delays.
Okay.
We're crossing our fingers.
Shoreline, next one. Shoreline, if you remember last time, there's that huge pile of dirt here that they've been moving off to get into the other areas for the landscaping. It's getting close. The landscaping, other than the sod, is pretty much done. The sod is scheduled to go in mid-January or mid-June, 15th, I think. You'll start seeing grass on the site. Striping is done. And landscaping, they're just finishing all the site concrete. Next one. More of the site concrete that they just put in the entry there. Then filling in the landscaping. So the exterior is progressing well. Interior, pretty much everything is painted. This is the entry by the auditorium. The ceilings are painted. Next one. Inside the auditorium, seating is going in. Audio visual is being installed.
How many seats are in that auditorium?
I would have to look and get back to you.
It's probably similar to Centennial.
It's supposed to be 400 and something.
There's
right?
2 sides, there's 3.
Oh, there's
three
more.
of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, this,
You
yeah,
know, one-
there's another.
Okay. I'm like, oh.
This,
okay.
there's another, this whole section comes over here, and they're not done. This is only about halfway up still.
Great.
Okay. The flooring going into the gymnasium should be
It
done
looks
in the next
empty.
couple
There
weeks.
used to be supplies in there.
I know, they've cleared it all out and they've got that done. Flooring should be done in the next couple weeks, and then they'll start with the bleachers. The next one, this is the casework, the millwork. This is sitting in the administration office that looks out in the commons, so there's big glass blocking this off, so that's going well. The commons is all painted, starting to put in the ceiling clouds. Cafeteria, serving lines, the kitchen equipment is being installed. And then audio visual throughout all the classrooms. The classrooms are done virtually. So it'll be just testing and balancing, and they should be completely done first part of July. Next. Tim Pugh.
Do we have any questions on Shoreline before we move on?
Questions? Do teachers know when they can start moving in? Do you have a date for that?
Not until after July 1st, so we need to have occupancy.
Okay, Titview, their progression has been starting kind of in this corner over here. This is a cafeteria, Thunderdome up here, and just going in a clockwise rotation all the way around. Next one, so this is footings and foundations all in this area. This is cafeteria wall. This foundation wall is supposed to be poured this week to start masonry on the 3rd, June 3rd, which was on the schedule. It was June 20th, so well ahead of schedule. But the schedule also did kind of assume that it would all be done at once instead of this chase, and so it was a good move that they're doing, and they're staying ahead of schedule, so it's progressing.
That's for the
well.
North Gym? Am I looking at
This is the backside of the cafeteria, and then the Thunderdome over behind there.
So remind me what they're putting in here.
Is that where the North Gym was?
This will be a corridor going here, and then this will be the new gym.
That's a piping tunnel that's
It's a
being
piping tunnel.
That's right.
You can come up, Dave, yeah, help out with this. So yeah, that's a piping tunnel underground.
Huh? We tore down the North Gym and we're doing the North Gym. In the same place. Okay.
And I have a slide later that'll show a little better what that is, where that is. This is just against where the Thunderdome is here. This is against the other gym that was just built. So yeah, the utility tunnel already backfilling and compacting against the foundations ready for the masonry. And then, like I said, they're just kind of chasing them around, so continuing the footings as they go around. Starting to compact and fill the site where the new parking lot will be. They did change this to be more appropriate and compacted to a level that's appropriate for a building, not just a parking lot.
And can I ask a question? Where the north gym is going in, were there any piers or anything like that that had to go in before?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
under all the footings.
Under all of it, okay.
That prior picture shows you the
Okay.
the helical piers that
Oh,
were
okay,
running.
sorry, I didn't know what I was looking at. Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
And then just overall view of them, get it all graded and smoothed out. And as we get into the discussion of the changes, you'll see some things like this. During the previous phase, they pretty much we went through all the approvals of submittals, and to avoid any delays in materials, they purchased pretty much everything they could. And so they pretty much have everything. Still is going to start going into fabrication next week or two. So as we look at changes, it'll be hard to calculate the cost savings just because much of the materials hasn't already been bought.
We just need to Rebecca is now online. She's
Oh,
the
perfect.
president, so she's online now.
Okay, next.
I'm gonna turn her so she can see. I think it's fine. You're good.
This is inside the bleacher building. It's pretty much done. The bleachers are 99% done. That press box will just be coming in June to do that final connection up there. This is in concessions. Tile is done, cabinets are done, kitchen equipment's going in, and it'll be done. So they're progressing well, and we'll be ready for football. Pavilion is done.
Oh, don't know how that happened. Hold on.
I can show him a Mac.
Oh,
love it.
I'm writing words, aren't they?
Projecting, anybody want to turn it off for me? So you should be able to see the screen. It's coming, sorry. It takes a minute to recover from dying.
So yeah, this is.
That little road.
Yep, this is that pathway. So it did previously go up there against the fence.
I gotta start. Hold on, I'm getting there.
We'll
Any
still
questions?
stay
Let's
here.
put it in.
Going
Yeah,
back to
questions
the
while she has-
pavilion.
Yes.
When is that open? Is it going to be open? Like, I still know the fencing's still around it.
It should be open. It should be able to open now.
Okay, so is the fencing down? I don't know.
Cause it's up in that
What's the
picture.
rock? I don't understand.
Yeah,
That's
we'll
like
find
a
out
path-
about that.
that's
Why
like
they.
a pathway, like ADA
Down there.
accessibility.
Yeah,
to
this
get up.
is stairs going up, and then this is the ADA
I
pathway.
see. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the sod.
They might be wanting to keep people off the sod for a few
The
days
sod,
until
maybe
it
that's
roots,
what I
or
was thinking.
it'll just destroy it
Okay.
and get traffic.
And, sorry, I'm gonna ask a question, maybe this is with you, Devin, with facilities, can the public contact you to rent the pavilion, or?
So we're just in the process of moving rentals for our buildings into the district office, just because, well, then we can do fields, rentals, buildings, so that the city doesn't capture all of that revenue for us, and so we can make it a little bit easier for people to
So I would
actually
need to
rent.
contact
We would
the
have to-
district office.
We'll put a button on the website that says rented facility.
Okay.
Okay. Then that south access, yeah, it was here. This is now just all going to be filled in with landscaping, a bunch of trees. So, next one, and then this is just at the top of that. This was all the existing that remained going from there, but this is just where it connects up to the football field. So that's all complete. Next. And then this is the current bus loop over on the north end. They're getting started on getting the landscaping going
It
on
makes
that.
a huge difference that the fences are dim. Like,
Yeah.
I walked by there the other day and I'm like, sweet, what's different?
Oh yeah, I went through the same thing. I had to go
Like,
in
something's
last week.
different.
Wait, we're landscaping that corner area, not parking?
That's a retention basin for all the stormwater on the
Retention.
site.
Okay.
It will be. I know it's just a big flat section.
Is that supposed to be where the portables might be?
That would be it, that we'd have to fit that into that parking space.
Okay. Correct. Okay. Any questions about that? before
Yeah,
we
can
get
I
into
ask
this?
one when is the turf supposed to go in for football? Didn't that start today?
It's supposed to start today, I'm sorry.
Okay. Do we know if it started today?
I'll find out afterward.
So the rest of this is the changes that would need to be made to the current phase in order to prepare for the next phase, if that's what we decided. But the decision has to be made, I mean, immediately, just so they can make some of these changes. Dave needs to work on the plans so that Westland can make those changes, so.
Okay.
And Dave, jump in anytime.
Sure.
And any questions? Next one. So we tried to organize these by, well, it's complicated, but very.
And before you start, can I ask a question? What you're saying to prepare for the next phase, that would prepare us for either future potential choice of a 2-year or a 4-year plan?
Correct.
Well, either
So we'll
way,
be
the
equally
things need to
prepared
be
for
done.
either
Yep.
of those two things.
What
Okay,
we're
thanks.
talking about today is trying to avoid having the district spend money
Yeah.
only to tear it out in a
Right.
year, right?
So the orange is, with either approach, the 2 or the 4-year, the orange is the new addition that we're talking about. The auditorium here, the CTE here, administration, visual arts up here. All of these lines here is the utilities currently planned. As you saw in that picture, they're already grading out there. Those are already in the ground. So, well, they will be very soon. We don't have time to redesign and reroute them completely because we don't know exactly what size or where they're going to need to go. So the recommendation at this point, leave it as is, but where we can on the different lines out here, put off shut-off valves so that we can make easy connects in the future and just abandon those lines underneath the new build.
Right. One thing to add to that, though, is the way the code reads, if you're installing utility in a parking lot, you can run it at a shallower slope. But if you put a building on top of it, it has to be steeper because they don't want it to clog up and you can't get to it. So all these lines are designed based on being under a parking lot. So we're trying to get it redesigned enough that we can install it to sit under a building and not cause you any code complications in the future, right? So it's not changing material, but it's changing the slope of it, which will affect the contractor right away.
Okay. And those lines are completed now?
What's that?
Those are the completed lines?
Yeah, they're not built.
The plant.
They were designed for
Currently
phase
planned.
1, and the contractor has all the material on site and he's ready to start digging to put them in at the current design, right?
Which would it be a steep enough slope?
Yeah,
If
and
we
if they
put
install it
building-
the way it is now, we'll have to tear all of it out,
Okay.
which we don't want to do.
Because on their schedule, this work is supposed to be done within the next
Correct.
month.
Okay.
So this is half of the solution. The first half is making it work under a building. The second part is when we finish the design, we may find some of the pipes are not big enough to handle the additional load. And so we may still have to go in and modify a few. That's the part we just don't know at this point.
Got it.
Okay?
But if the slope's prepared, you can change those materials
Yes.
out accordingly.
Correct.
The existing
Run under the
slope.
same slope, just go with the bigger pipe.
Okay, item number 2, next one. More on the side parking. So this is the current parking lot. You can see how it overlaps the footprint of the future phase. We've got to do something here temporarily, primarily not just traffic circulation, but ADA. We still need to provide ADA parking here somewhere temporarily. So we know we're not going to be able to, what we want to do, what we're recommending is to simplify it as much as possible. And asphalt is typically in a parking lot, well, with the bus, it's probably designed as a 4 to 6 inch, and then a sub base. We'd like to simplify that and just do a 2-inch asphalt, which is going to get you, it's going to last for 5 years still. I mean, it's not going to be a 20-30 year last, but it's going to save some money. But again, they are already starting to grade out there as if it's per the current design with the thicker. So this is something that we would have to get them directed on immediately.
And in the end, you're going to lose the entire parking lot when we do the next phase.
Right.
So the idea is, and for 3 or 4 years, it'll work, and you can save a pretty good chunk of money there.
But we need to think about how it will work in the interim, still providing the parent loop, but is there some of the landscaping we can eliminate now, the curb and gutter? How can we make this still efficient until the next phase while keeping the costs low? So that's design work that would need to be done pretty quick.
Right.
And there were lights, right? Exterior lights.
There's a couple light poles.
There's light poles that we'd like to move out of the footprint as well. Same with fire hydrants.
We're not going to keep the one that blinks all the time.
We'll leave that one just so you can see it.
That spoke to me
Sounds like
for
a
all 4
horror
years I've
movie.
been at
It really is the worst.
It is, like,
I
yeah.
feel like I'm in a bad episode of, like, I don't know.
Every time I go see
True Detective.
Okay, next one. Stairs. So there's 3 stairs. This one is emergency egress for the current administration. These 2 over here, and this is one is enclosed, which we'll get to. These 2 were put in, from what I understand, just for convenience for direct access into the gymnasium areas. So our recommendation is to get rid of the enclosure, just do what we need to do here for egress, and then these 2 just eliminate completely.
So the C we can't eliminate because it's an emergency egress out of the gym, but we have to rotate it because right now it's going to run into the new building. So we're flipping it around to exit to the south in hopes that we can preserve it when we do phase 2.
Okay, so then this one eliminate completely and this one rotate.
Correct. B was so you could have athletic access and not get into the rest of the building. It's not an egress path, it's a convenience enclosure that now obviously it's not going to be an entrance, so we can save the money.
Okay, next one. You'll see here, this is that one on administration, how it's currently designed to be fully enclosed. We just do the bare minimum of making it concrete and making it so it's still an emergency egress. Okay, next. Entries. These are both currently designed as entry vestibules with canopies. We'd like to minimize those. We would recommend minimizing those, and with the elimination of the stairs there, also eliminate that entry completely, since it's just convenience. So next one, to see how those look. This is that secure entry. This is the main one going at the commons. We still likely need to keep a secure entry vestibule. But all of this canopy, all of this pretty stuff, sorry, that's not an architectural term, but
it does look pretty.
It would have to be torn down later. And that vestibule will need to be torn down later, but it's still needed until the future phase starts. So our recommendation is to just keep just that vestibule portion.
The canopy would conflict pretty significantly with the new auditorium when it gets built right there. So the idea is to get rid of it so we don't have to get rid of it later. That material isn't yet ordered. So all the steel for it and everything, they can stop that part. The pieces that they can't stop, we can reuse on the next phase. Okay.
Same with this one. This is the one for convenience going to the gymnasium space. Okay, next one. Windows and louvers. So the new building is planted sit right up against here. No space in between. So next one, we need to look at everything that's on that elevation. Go to the next one.
It looks like it's halfway through.
Just trying.
It is
There
really
we go.
large.
Look at that.
There we go.
So recommend all these windows in red to be all eliminated, and you just take that
Masonry straight
just
down.
masonry straight down. This is a mechanical room up here with these louvers. Get rid of those and do rooftop louvers, and then to still get the daylight into the space, these would all be skylights that we would add into the current.
What would be the reason for that change? I'm just curious.
Because
the
this
buildings go right
Because
up
it's going
next
right
to
up
it.
against, okay.
It's going right up against it, so we'll have to tear them out later.
Okay.
Next
And then we
one.
can still provide daylight.
Yeah.
That's right.
Got it.
Chad, is there another slide we're talking about the snow load? This might be a good spot if there is.
No, go for it.
So one of the other things that we have here right now, this was the west face of the building when we were going to be done. When we put the auditorium on there that's going to be taller than that wall, it now introduces a snow load on this roof that wasn't designed for it. And when the engineers ran the calculations, it's almost double the amount of load that is currently designed for that roof. So the benefit is we know now, and we can get in and do something before they install it. If they build it that way and then we come in and add it, it's going to be really bad trying to restructure the roof. So that whole section right there, we may have to add double the joists in there. You already have the joists and deck on site, so we don't want to send those back, but if we bought additional joists to plug in next to them, we could probably solve the problem. That's going to be one of the major issues that we've got to deal with.
Probably solve the problem.
Yeah.
Or solve the problem.
So we will solve the problem without getting rid of the joists that you currently have. When I say probably, we may need triple the
More.
joists. I don't know what
Okay,
the
gotcha.
number is.
Okay, that helps.
Our intent is to not add depth to the joists, so in doing that, we add more of them,
Okay, that makes sense.
right?
Okay. But we have enough on site that we could do.
We would have to.
That's the
order.
problem.
We would
Order
more.
probably
You'd have to order more.
But we have to work
We
on
have
it.
too few right now, so we won't throw away what you've bought.
Sure.
My probably is I don't know how many more we have
Yeah,
to buy.
but not that we can't fix it.
Yes, yes,
This can be fixed.
absolutely.
I love the can.
Yes.
Okay, next one. This just shows where that affects. So this is what's on that wall. Each one of these red dots is those windows that we showed being removed. Level 1, level 2. So you're really not losing, you're losing in this corridor here. That's going to become a corridor with no windows. But the dance and cardio is a 2-story space, so those skylights will come straight in into there, and then skylights for these upper classrooms here. So, and your question before about the cafeteria, what's on the other side, it's this area here.
That door right there is the access into those classrooms within the cafeteria, if you're familiar with that spot.
What are those classrooms used for?
These classrooms?
Yeah, correct.
No, these are new.
From the cafeteria.
These are, the one off the cafeteria, currently, I think is just being used as an in-school suspension.
Yeah, it's been flexible. It's changed probably 4 times during phase 1.
Okay, next. Masonry walls, the current plan is more of a decorative block on this area. We just recommend to simplify and keep it cheap and paint it. Next one, you can see what that looks like. These different areas here are designed to be like on the academic wing. Keep it simple. This wall is off the administration. Counseling is on the other side of this. Just instead of put a new veneer on there, just paint it for now.
And what you'll see, what those are doing is that's the shear wall for these canopies. So if the canopy goes away, we can save the masonry. We can't technically save it, but we can save it because we can reuse it in phase 2. It's already been bought. But what you need to be clear on is that's what you're going to have is an existing masonry wall that essentially looks like that. It wasn't ever meant to be an exposed visible wall. So there's holes in it we'll have to patch. So the idea would be that you take off what's shaded in red and then we patch the existing wall and paint it. So it'll look okay. It's not going to look particularly nice, but it's going to save you a lot of money by living with that for a little bit.
Sorry. My phone was supposed to be on silent. It was, I don't know how that came through. Anyway, cafeteria. The design intent of the cafeteria is to open this space up, open into commons, open here, make it just more open and flow. We did make the recommendation here while this wall is exposed to go ahead and demolish it now, but that since they got to jump on the masonry and start that work out here, the third we may be too late. We could look at other ways to demolish it inside to save a little, but we'd also, before the commons gets open, we'd like to see how these spaces transition and try to make some changes now to minimize the future commons.
The idea here is if you've been up there, the student circulation is through here, and it goes over to the Dorth Gym and the Thunderdome, right? We would prefer to take this wall down towards the outside construction zone as opposed to taking it down in this direction where the students are circulating, right? Just for safety. There were some photos that showed the rebar there. We were talking about the tunnels. That's in this spot looking that way. So one of the thoughts is we let the concrete contractor pour the footing and foundations. They'll backfill it so the mason can start. They can just over backfill to cover the top of concrete and then start to remove that wall to the south. The issue is we've got to do it yesterday. Otherwise we're slowing down Westland and keeping up with the schedule they've committed to. So we're kind of stuck from two directions that we've got to move on it. This wall was designed to sit on a thickened slab, and the thickened slab doesn't exist. It's just not there. So structurally it would be a really good idea to pull that wall out. In the future we can just leave it completely gone. We'll have a few columns in there so it'll look really nice and open, but we've got to get that wall out quick before the mason gets past that spot.
Okay. Now I think this is the last one. The commons area did not get structural upgrades to those columns and the beams in that area since it was an existing space. That was the direction given at the time, so.
And that means the entire commons.
The entire commons.
It was not part of the structural upgrade, just like the admin wasn't, the auditorium wasn't, right? So now when we put on phase 2, it's going to landlock that space, and the ability to upgrade it later is going to be really challenging. So the question, we can leave it, we don't have to touch it, but if you don't want it to be landlocked and difficult to gain access to retrofit it later, now would be the time to do that.
And the commons, and now the commons won't be open until February, so.
Yeah.
What do you mean to retrofit it later? Like what would we do with it besides the commons area?
So it's never been analyzed structurally to determine the quality of the connection of the wall to the roof deck. Right, so there's an extra level of analysis that has happened on all of the other areas that we've, like the sped area. We had to analyze that because we were renovating it, right? Because we were isolating the commons and not improving it, there was no need to analyze it and come up with a design solution for it. So the analysis has to look at, for example, these masonry walls that are going to be really problematic when you have an auditorium with an entrance and you walk out and there's big walls right in front of you and you can't have access to that commons. Those are your lateral resisting elements. So the engineer has to look at those and see what that means. We're re-roofing that area anyways, so the deck is all exposed. It's a perfect time from the top to come in and make sure the connections are the way they were supposed to be installed. So it's that kind of process we're talking about.
So analyzing and seeing what structural changes would need to be made.
Right. Part of it is, did they build it the way it was
Yeah.
designed? And if they did, that's great. If they didn't, we want to try and deal with it now while the roof
Yes.
is off.
And so if we don't do that, it's kind of something like ignorance. We just don't quite know what's wrong or not wrong. If we landlock it, it's like, well, we're making an assumption that it's fine enough. No, we
The
eventually
assumption
will
you're
have to
making
do
is
it.
the funds aren't there to do it now.
Okay.
I guarantee it's not
Okay.
at the structural level that you would have a building today.
Okay.
Correct.
It's just whether or not you guys want to fund fixing it now or sometime in the future at a higher cost.
Sure. Okay.
And now is going to be much less disruptive since it's already closed down under construction and while we're planning to redo the roof. So now
Okay.
would be the cheapest time to do it.
Okay.
That was it. Or 10 people who
Well, you
I'm fairly certain that is the end of the slide.
That's it.
All right, what other questions or comments are there?
Quick
Meg?
question, just with that commons area, the reason it wasn't done, just because in theory it didn't necessarily have to be done in phase 1, is that?
Correct. Just like the admin, the auditorium,
Yes.
music, they weren't part of the portions that were being replaced.
Okay.
So the part that became new, we dealt with, but the
Sure.
part that we weren't, we just put
And
an
this part was
expansion
just
joint
kind
and
of
left it where it
And I
was.
think that it was probably a funding decision at the time, but the learning stair that opens up into it,
Uh-huh.
that was part of this, and so they probably the decision was, let's go ahead and give it a facelift, improve the look of it, but leave it structural.
Yeah.
Okay.
You remember the big wood copper funky ceiling in there?
Yeah.
That was not hung in a very effective way when you pull the ceiling tiles out and realize it's a couple wires that's hanging all that wood up there. So it was get that stuff out, which we did. Put up some ceilings like this. Other than that, it was really just kind of making it look nice.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
So
Thank you.
when do we as a board have to? Today, on some of it, we need to make a decision today to get them. And it's not something that needs to be voted on. It's not, but there needs to be direction given on moving forward with the intention that we are going to be doing the next phase sooner than later.
We don't really have any dollar signs associated with this.
Not yet.
But I understand it's to avoid
some of it will
other
be savings.
dollars
So
that
in the
get
end,
pulled
there
back out.
it might be a net of not very much.
Right.
We'll save some by
Right.
not doing some of the some of what is in the first phase. But when you're talking about purchasing extra joists, if we need triple the amount, then that will probably not be a net zero or a net to our favor. The 2-inch asphalt as opposed to a 6-inch, that will be less of a cost, but some of the other things, the skylights and fixing of the commons is likely going to be an additional, or at least a lessening of a net positive.
And what we would be looking for is to just proceed with the design, the actual design, to get the plans over to the contractor to get the actual pricing. But yes, some of them, the cafeteria one is one needs a design now. The block, the masonry block, the decorative, we can wait.
So the utilities under the parking lot?
It's too late.
Yeah. Although the inverts we can still
inverts is
fix
next, yeah.
if we know you're okay with it.
But that is, those are the two things, I think, from what I understand, and making sure that we get the 2-inch rather than the 4-inch, because they're already grading right now for the 6-inch. Those are the things that have more of an immediacy, but if we're going to decide on those, then we can decide on all of them, so that Dave can get those plans and get the contractor to make the changes that are necessary.
Right.
Order the joists that we need so that we have that roof is more secure, because we don't need another flood.
Okay. So do we make that, is that this discussion right here that we make the decision right here?
Yeah.
Okay. What are our thoughts on that?
And any questions? I brought the people who know way more than us, and so I appreciate them coming.
It seems to me if we don't move forward with these changes, that
it'll cost
it's
more
gonna
in the
cost
long
more,
run,
right.
but it won't delay any of the existing construction. I mean, it's still, there's some things so the decision that now would basically say we are planning on moving forward with phase 2 faster than waiting for another 10 years.
I think it's fair to say if you just said build phase 1 the way it's designed and don't do anything, you'll pay substantially more when we come in for phase 2 and have to retrofit it at that point.
Yes. Okay. Remind me really quickly, when it was voted to go with phase 1, what was the original plan of timeline? Was it 10 years?
It was not 10 years. When the original plan to do the whole
in 2019.
school,
No. So in 2019, when we had to say, you know what, we're going to phase this out. We'll start this phase 1. What was the plan for phase 2?
There was not a plan for phase 2. So it was we'll deal with the rest of it later.
Okay. Just I'm curious. What we're changing.
We were at that time we were facing what Risk said we had to fix, and that was what we did.
Okay, perfect.
And that's what the voters voted on.
So and then at that point, or actually just recently when they started getting into those walls, we realized that the problem was a little bit more immediate on what we needed to do phase 2. That was never our intention. Our intention was not to do phase 2 for a while.
Personally, I don't want to close it up and wait. I'm a fan of committing to finishing the school and getting them through and out of construction as quickly as possible, actually. So I would support, this seems wiser to me, to be on all of these points,
I think
mindful of the direction in the future.
I agree with Lisa. I think we just need to be very transparent with the public of why it looks the way it looks. This is not the finished product. So that they're just like, what did we just pay money for? Like, no, we're trying to save money so that when we do it, like, just let the public understand that.
As we get those plans in place, we can post them and people can see what it's supposed to look like. And I mean, that's something that we committed to being, you know, in our community meetings. So it's a little bit more transparent and making sure that the community understood why we were making the decisions we were making, rather than just feeling like we'd made decisions and didn't ever vocalize what those decisions were for.
I do feel like, I mean, I'm just saying what I personally would like to see happen, but I do understand that, like, if the public doesn't want to vote on a bond, like, and we have made some of these trade-offs, and depending on how we figure out the funding of that there's a chance some of these things would need to get, you know, we do a shorter term parking lot, but we don't fund the completed project, right? That we would end up needing to go back and build a more durable parking lot if we didn't go ahead.
And that could just be part of a capital list one year.
I just want to acknowledge, I know that's a possibility. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but I still would be willing to make those choices now, strategically towards completion for me personally.
Right, because we just set it up for when that decision is made. If we don't make it, that is
none of what they're suggesting is going to hinder if we don't end up doing the project.
Yeah.
It'll just make it easier to do it when we eventually know we have to.
Yeah.
So it just won't look as pretty.
Yeah. Won't look as finished.
But
on some of those pictures, I was a little concerned. There's holes in the walls. Is this gonna be secure? I mean, the kids gonna be safe going to school, and no one can like sneak through a hole in the wall?
I mean, at the moment there are plywood walls, basically. So like.
To the outside.
Yes.
Correct.
The holes will all be infilled. It's students don't have access to it.
Eventually.
The students don't have access to it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's well within the construction area.
Yeah.
And they can patch it pretty quick. We're talking 3-foot holes or damage to a corner of a masonry wall, or it's pretty minor things to try and repair at this point. Might have been an electrical panel that they pulled out or something.
One of the things that came up in safety meeting was that the construction plans for Wasatch and Shoreline were also not looked at by security. So if Jason Garrison can be looped in to make sure, and or the SROs for the next phase to make sure that it is safe and secure.
and that's one of the reasons why we went with the other plan, was so that there's the one main entry, so we could secure that entry, so that there wasn't multiple entries on the exterior of the building. And so, I mean, that is one of the considerations of why we went with the plan that we have. But yes, we can definitely have Jason and the SROs take a look.
Rebecca, I'm going to give you just a second to get yourself together, see if you have any comments. If you don't, that's fine. I'll say mine while I'm waiting to see if you have anything that you want to say. I agree. I think that it's probably smarter, and if we're going to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, I think this is something that we need to be doing, because eventually it will need to be done, and I think this is probably, and it sounds like the net positive that Devin was talking about. I feel like it's not really a lose situation. I mean, if we have to have triple the piers, then maybe, but I think that the pillars are Joyce, whatever.
We knew what you meant.
In my social worker brain, they're all the same.
We knew what you meant.
But I think that I do think that this is probably the smartest course of action. Rebecca, do you have anything to add? I don't know if you can hear me.
Hi, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, we can.
Yes.
I don't see any reason not to go ahead with the changes. It makes sense to prep things for phase 2. I mean, I personally hope we can do it sooner than later, but I think if we're prepared for it, it makes so much sense to do it that way rather than waste taxpayer money. So I like it. I'm in favor of giving the directive to go ahead with it.
Okay, thank you. So I don't think, it sounds to me like everybody is in favor of that. I assume Jennifer would be as well in the conversations we've had with her. Do you need anything additional from us, Devin?
No.
Okay. Thank you for being here and
Thank you.
answering our questions.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Dave, I'll give that sign.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item number 7 is discussion about our facilities meetings. We are currently
Behind schedule.
15 minutes behind schedule.
That's
We
right,
can
that's
always
what
move
we
it
passed.
over, but we can start this discussion.
This is kind of related. So.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of related. We'll be fine.
Okay.
So I think attached to board docs, I added a document that just kind of summarizes some of the takeaways that we had from the 4 different meetings that we had at Centennial, Dixon, Timpview, and Provo. Tried to categorize some of those specific to Timpview, specific to the Dixon site. There were a few. I don't know what she just muted herself. Okay. There were some tied to Wasatch Elementary, and then realizations both from our perspective as well as I think with the public, recognizing as they're starting to understand the difference really between a GO bond and an MBA bond, and how that changes the cost of things in the long run and what that looks like. And then just overall concerns. I thought it was interesting that there really was a concern that was expressed that we're putting a lot of conversation into our buildings and not so much into our proficiency. And I actually appreciated that people had gone to our website and actually looked up our proficiency rates and knew something about how we were doing and were asking really hard questions about that. I thought that was a great situation. And then just kind of put in place some possible next steps as to where we need to go from here, and really that we need to continue these conversations and continue to be transparent. I do appreciate that our communications team has put together a really good website, and it has buttons along the top when you click on construction where people can submit questions and feedback. They can look at the presentation that Devin and I did. If you click on that, it actually takes them to the podcast that we did where we go through and explain the presentation, and then it has specific information about our current construction project. So I think we're trying to do some things here. I think really that one of the major takeaways that I got from individuals was being really clear about what we intend to do at Timpview and at the Dixon site before we are asking the public for money. There was a desire to have some feedback in what that looks like, particularly at the Dixon site, to have kind of a conversation. But we also know we're on a time crunch, but then that just means we might have to work faster and harder to make sure everything's in place prior to that point in time.
And in relation to that, the feedback I got was that we have plans in place and bids before we ask them for. So that will require us to make a decision, get an architect, have them draw up plans, do a pre-construction bid so that we have a pretty good idea, knowing that there would have to be a cushion built in for any inflation. Although the inflation is at least slowing down a little bit compared to what it was a few years ago. But that's something that was part of the feedback, was they don't want to just have a basic idea or rendering. They want actual plans that they can do feedback on.
At NSBA, I attended a session, and what the district talked about how they did exactly what they were just asking, and it was they haven't had one that's, while the superintendent's been there, they haven't had a bond turned down because the public has been involved and they're able to see the plans and they're able to give impact, and it's a better building as a result. So I think that's probably, if we can make it work, I think that's probably a good direction to go.
And it will be something that we'll need to decide probably in the next few months, so we have time to do a plan and bids before it's time to start actually advertising. This is what we're planning on doing and how much we can.
Okay. Anything else from you two before we get questions and comments?
No, I just wanted you guys to have a chance to kind of talk about what you observed from the meetings and the direction you want to give
Maybe
Devin and
feedback
myself
for
then.
us if we want to do future meetings.
Okay, what feedback do we have as a board?
First off, this is great, having it all kind of consolidated here, so thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing the meetings. There was a lot during a time when a lot of other things were going on. I really appreciated the ones I was able to attend.
We were tired by the end.
Oh, yes, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is emotionally and mentally a lot of effort. So, I don't have feedback, I'm thinking.
That's okay. Anybody else? Questions or comments, feedback?
I love the summary that was put in board docs. I think that would be great for anyone in the community to see and to be able to access. When I'm on the construction projects page, by the way, it takes a little bit for this banner to move. Do you know what I'm saying? Hers isn't moved at all. To get to the one that clicks on to where you can get to community meetings to discuss capital facilities needs. So when you first go to this page, it's this construction update for Timpview High School. So that is a piece of feedback that maybe getting that other link as something that stays put on that page.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Would be helpful, just because
Yep.
we sat here for a while trying to figure out how to access it ourselves, and then all of a
I know,
sudden
I was like, mine came
how
up
did
and
you
it
get
was
there? I'm
fine.
like,
And
I
then
don't
all
know,
of a
it was
sudden,
here
yeah.
and now it's gone, and then all of a sudden it swiped and I was like, oh, that's why.
Well, I think maybe having the takeaways might be
But
a
the
good thing to have
takeaways
on
linked there as well,
Yeah.
I think would be great, and I actually really appreciated the time spent with the public and the public's willingness to engage, as well as just your willingness to then type up, here are the concerns they're having, here are the things we're hearing, because that will help us all be, I think, more thoughtful. So I think it's been really helpful so far. Thank you.
Right, it closes the loop, right? Like, get the feedback, and by summarizing it, it's like, okay, this is what I hear you saying, right?
Now, the breadth of direction that people gave us with Dixon is, you know, you could go a million different ways and someone will be happy. But having that, you know, a basic idea and what we want that to look like would be super helpful.
I think we were just pretty clear on what people do not want, and so I think if we could just take from what was left over, there's a lot of great things we can do with the building. And we may have to come up with a few different plans, because I mean, anywhere from 30 million to 100 million, and maybe people need to see it. And maybe we don't need probably the exact plans like we talked about for Timpview or for other buildings, but we may need to have some kind of idea to show them, because it's conceptually it may be hard.
Right,
It's hard for me to get, right? So this is what with a $100 million building, we could build this fantastic CTE, and this is what it would have. But if we don't want to go that big, then we have the 20 million option, which is to do this. And we may need to do something like that. But as a board, I think we need to be narrowing the options a little bit more to give some direction.
And I was just going to say, I think starting that boundary study would help me try to decide some of those things at least. I know the timing may not work out perfectly to wait till the boundaries, you know what I mean? But just even starting to gather in the information of how we are using the facilities we currently have, and, you know, kind of what our resources are. Frankly, I know I should know this, but I don't exactly even know. Like, someone will say, well, we have this property here, and I'm like, oh, we do? Like, I'm sure someone told me we had that. I would love just to have someone here, maybe send
like a map of
me something that just says in terms of assets, like land and property and building.
We can send that to you.
I would just love to see that too, so that as we're thinking about the use of Dixon, I could think with the use of all of our resources.
Thank you. Rebecca, I'm going to ask you in just a minute, but first, anybody else have any input or anything that they want to say? Yes, well.
Yeah, I'm thinking that because we value public input on these, with future projects, if we might just want to create a citizen advisory committee attached to that project, so like a few parents from the school are able to get regular information on what's going on, rather than them having to come to these meetings or whatever, or just like making sure that there are regular avenues for parents and a community member specifically to know what's happening with projects.
And I love that idea. The only tricky part that you get into with that is you have 50 Indians, and they all want a bathroom in a certain spot, you know, or so I love the idea of having community input. I just want to make sure that we're not
Well, not like to design the plan, but to just have regular feedback onto what's happening.
I like that idea.
Rebecca, oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's what, I mean, I went to the same class as Gina, and that's what they had, was, the advisory committee was like that.
Oh yeah, they can be done.
And then those people shared with everyone what they saw in the meeting.
So then a question is, you know, we have a pretty good capital facilities committee. Do you want to expand that to be more than just district employees to create the long-term plan? Or
Maybe we create a long-range planning committee and put some members of the public on it.
Because we've done that before. It wasn't really well attended by the public. But I mean, I love the idea of making sure the public has buy-in into what we're doing, into the plans that we have, and so they understand and can share. But I just want to make sure we aren't complicating things so much that
I've had a couple of people approach me about wanting to be a part of these, and I'm guessing there are people in all areas who, and maybe we just need to capitalize on those who really are very interested, you know what I mean, who have expressed interest or who would be interested, because those are the ones who will attend those meetings, because the last thing we want to do is have a bunch of meetings where people aren't attending, right? Correct. But I do think we can probably find a way to find people in each area of the city to be a part of this, and kind of help us out. And if we can't, then we can't, right? But we've tried. So I think maybe we can just take a look at it and see if it's feasible or not.
Maybe we just tell them purely that we're focusing on Timpview and Dixon, and I think you will get individuals that, because those are the priorities we've identified from now till 2030, and so it will require this kind of level of commitment. Do you want to be a part of that?
And this would be additional meetings on top of our capital facility meetings, or would that?
Because capital facilities talks about lots of different things.
This would be something specific, kind of like an offshoot.
to a long-range planning.
Rebecca, go ahead.
Can I just get clarification on one thing? Devin, you just mentioned a minute ago that we need to know within the next couple months what our plans are. That's to know if we're going ahead with bonding. Is that correct, with the bond campaign?
Well, what we need to know in the next few months is what the plans are for Dixon, so we can start the process of getting those plans in place. Because it's a 6-month process, and if we want to go and actually have a successful bond campaign with really good public support, we need to have.
Okay, that is helpful. So do we feel like we've gotten enough feedback from these meetings that we're ready to go ahead with making up some? I mean, obviously it seems like we know what we need to do with Timpview, but Dixon is a bigger question mark. So do we feel like we have enough feedback from these meetings in order to start putting together a few possibilities? And what does the timeline look on those possibilities? And like, what kind of concrete numbers can we have on them? I'm just curious what can actually happen in the next couple months to be ready for that.
In the next couple months, not a lot, but in the next 6 to 8 months, we could probably have some really good concrete numbers once we have a concrete plan, because they won't give us numbers until we have an actual plan in place.
I think what we have learned is that they don't want the property sold. I think we have learned that there is a lot of frustration with the idea of putting a district office there. There's a preference for a school or some sort of educational facility, whatever that might look like. So I think a part of this too is, you know, what do you as a board feel like is the best use of that space? I've talked with, in talking with Clay, like we can go through and create an outline of how far away different career and technical education programs are, so you can see what those barriers are for students that are trying to access some of those programs, and so which ones make the most sense.
And what kind of space would be
and what kind of space would be required, for example, and how much space would be required for East Bay Post High. You know, there are some of those things that we're basically renting or leasing that we can pull back into the district office. Adult ed, caps, all of those pieces.
Okay, so my question is then, like, who is going to put together the official proposal? Does the board need to get together and have a brainstorming session and put this all together with all this information that's provided, or are you going to come to us with a proposal?
I think I would love to come with a couple of proposals, but I think also you need to have a brainstorming session about what you would like to see as well. I don't know that you guys
Okay,
are all on the
what's
same
the
page
order
as
of
to what
operations
looks
for
like.
that? Is it for us to brainstorm and to give you some ideas of pieces of information you should gather, or is it for you guys to gather and come to us with some things and then we brainstorm?
I think we start with some pieces of information that we can gather, and then you're gonna have a ton more questions that are gonna come out of that as a result. And then you tell us what to walk away with in terms of more information that we need to gather as part of this process.
And part of that is, what are your priorities? What do you want to see moved over into that area the most? Because
do we feel like we need to have an additional meeting, or is this something we can add into like a study session coming up?
You should probably have a separate meeting. I hate to say that.
Okay. It's our favorite. Don't worry. We're happy to schedule extra meetings.
I love meetings.
So let's.
As long as Jennifer brings a
let's
cake.
just try and get that on the schedule sometime soon, because I would like to move forward with that. If we really do, I mean, I hear all the feedback from the community, and if we really feel like we're ready to go ahead and start putting together an actual proposal, then let's do it. Let's get moving on it.
My concern is one of the things that Lisa brought up is saying she would like to see the results of the boundary study, but that does not mesh in the same timeline.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering
So
about.
here's your issue that you're gonna run into, because then you're gonna have to bond two separate bonds, right? Because then you're gonna have to bond for Timpview, and then you're gonna have to go back and bond for Dixon. And my concern with that is, do we have enough trust with the Dixon community that they will vote for a bond to support Timpview, and will they trust that that Timpview community will support a bond for the Dixon site? That those two, in my mind, probably need to come together.
I can answer that now, no.
Yeah, I think those have to come as a package deal, and a boundary study will take us at least a year. Like we won't have the results of that boundary study probably until March or April.
Are you saying that the bond would have to be put like on the, like in the same ballot question, or could be two separate proposals on the ballot?
No, it would be.
You'd have to be in the same.
It would be the same, so that you would bond for one in 2025, and then you'd have to bond for the second one in 2026.
Okay.
And my concern is that I don't think we have enough political capital to.
The only other option on that would be to give a guess on how much it would be based on initial discussions, and then just public will know that we won't issue the bonds until we're ready.
The plan is final.
So we could do that, but I really don't know that it would pass if we didn't have a concrete idea of what we were planning on doing.
Whether it would pass or not, I don't know if it's a good idea to make a decision, especially unless we are considering all the land we own, what we're going to do with other spaces we own, around what we can contribute and how we help finance some of this work. So, political capital or not, I don't want to make a bad decision because we have some feeling that we've got to link everyone together on a decision. I think that actually didn't serve this district well in the past, to try to link a lot of decisions together in the hopes that that meant every community would have buy-in. I just want to make sure we're really thorough. We ask the hardest questions of ourselves. We look at our land. We don't plan a facility that isn't really strategically part of a long-range plan, which is why last summer we started that conversation around what are our whole long-range needs. So I guess I just hope we will continue to gather as much data as possible and information, because I actually think the whole city of Provo wants to do what actually will serve the whole city of Provo. I really do. We just have to make sure we're wise about that, and we're transparent about it, and we are thinking about all of our resources, not just bond taxpayer resources.
Well, and I completely agree with you. The risk with that is that the bond will fail if you only have Timpview on it, but that may be a risk we're willing to take.
Yeah, and I'm not saying only put Timpview on a bond. I'm saying just please let's make sure that we're looking at what are all of our resources and assets, how well are we utilizing the schools we have, what is the potential need for growth based on that information? I mean, I hear numbers and see numbers around schools, but then I walk the halls sometimes at Centennial and you're like, how could you fit one more body in this school right now? So I just want to be thoughtful and mindful of as much as we can. I'm not trying to say any outcome yet.
No, but I think, no, I agree. I think we just need to, when we have this additional meeting, I think this is something that we really need to be talking about, and we need to be figuring out how exactly we want to approach this. We may want to approach it by separating them. We may want to approach it by putting them together, but I think we're going to need a longer time and everybody here in order to have that discussion. But I think that's a very worthwhile piece, and that's going to have to be discussed at the beginning before we can do anything else.
Do we want to do a Google form and have 7 or 9 of us fill out what we think should be done with Dixon? What should
I think it's so nebulous right now that it would be hard to have that. I really do think that this meeting, we love meetings. An additional meeting may be where that comes from. But if we do have ideas, perhaps we could, if we do already have ideas about what we want, I'm not quite sure yet, but I probably have some more concrete ideas than others, then maybe we could email them to Rebecca. You win, Rebecca.
Lucky.
Thank you so very much.
You are welcome.
I would love to have those as well, so we can start gathering information for you. Because I think that would be helpful. Because I think right now, like to Lisa's point, we have different plots of land that we can look at as well, but we have no idea what the worth of that land is, right? And what we're looking at there.
We've done an appraisal, but
Yeah.
we could provide
But
that
that could
list
be
for
part of
your
it. That
all-day
could be
meeting,
part
or
of
for
it.
the extra meeting.
Not an all-day
Not an
meeting.
all-day,
Don't say
an
all-day
extra
meeting.
meeting.
Just an extra treat.
Okay, so I've written down that we just need to, and maybe I can do this. I'll send an email to the whole board and just say, what ideas do you have? If you have anything that you want to contribute or things you think we need to be thinking about in this meeting, please email Wendy and Rebecca. How does that sound? I will get that sent out in the next century.
I think that sounds great, and I'll make sure to get another meeting on the books. We have an agenda planning, I don't know, like on Monday, but I think we can get another one scheduled pretty quick here too. So I'll get that email out.
All right. Thank you. Anything else before we move on to the next thing? We are only 5 minutes behind. Good job. Good job. Okay. The next up we have bus routes and courtesy stops, and I believe that is that Jared and Troy? Come on up. You have 30 minutes. We're supposed to end at 5, but we're not giving you quite that much time, so you can go a little over if you need.
I'll be done at 5.
Be done at 5?
We will be.
Get us back on track.
We will be. Bonnie, can you share, project the attachment with this? Recently, some questions about a potential bus route with Wasatch Elementary led us to gather some information for you as members of the board. Bonnie's going to project here something that you have that lists the total number of courtesy stops and what Troy would...
No, you want the thing that's on board docs.
Yeah, go to board docs and I'll reference that other document later.
Okay, great.
But it also lists the number of ineligible routes, and Troy's here to answer some questions for you. But as you can see overall that previously 13 different routes have been, or stops have been approved, and 46 of our routes are considered ineligible. We wanted to share this information with you because at the present time we currently do not have a procedure on how we might identify or approve a courtesy stop or a hazard route that might lead to one of these courtesy stops or potentially an entire route. And so we'd like to share this information with you. I'm going to turn some time over to Troy to sort of explain perhaps a history that's sort of cloudy as to how these were approved in the past, because we've not had a procedure in place. And we propose to take this to policy committee after consulting with some of our neighboring districts, just to give us a starting point so we can begin to identify how we might go about approving a courtesy stop. So, Troy, do you want to talk through some of this and perhaps some specific examples of your recent experience?
Yeah, so as far as with, like I mentioned before, with the routes, for elementary it's 1.5 miles for walks under 2 miles for secondary, and that's regardless of hazard, just based on the most direct path to and from the school. So a lot of these hazards. So that's 46 stops, not 46 routes that are on the ineligible. With an eligible state-funded route, we can have.
Can you explain what an ineligible route actually means?
We don't receive any funding on it.
Okay.
So if there's an ineligible route or a stop that the time and miles to accomplish that route is removed from our funding formula. So.
And so is it safe to kind of assume an ineligible route is probably like a hazardous route that we designated to some extent, maybe?
Correct. Correct.
How much is that costing us per year?
Well, it depends. So it depends on if it's a full route or if it's just other stops. So I provided earlier, the cost. If it's an ineligible stop, that's still a courtesy stop that is just still on the path. There's no miles associated with that, but it's 4 minutes per day of the transportation time. So 4 minutes per day, it adds up to about 12 hours a year. And then depending on the salary, and then there's all kinds of other considerations. You've got wear on the bus, you've got mechanic time, so there's
parts, administrative, everything involved in it. So to put a concrete number on it, specific, is challenging.
But
so
what we are saying though is that an ineligible route is one that without state reimbursement, we as a school district are covered.
Agreed. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. With the courtesy stops, those you can have one per route, as long as it's on the direct path to the school, for students that reside within the walk zone. Once you go to an additional stop on that route, then the second stop you'd have one courtesy stop, and then the second one would go ineligible. So then you have like Independence, that entire route is ineligible because the school doesn't fall into a boundary. So you guys were shared the maps with all the different stops that would have the courtesy and ineligible on it to kind of identify to judge whether a lot of them come into play with State Street, Geneva Road, such as that.
So Troy's referring to a separate email that was shared with you that has a little more detail that you could take and enlarge a map of each of these areas so you can see that detail. But in our conversations and trying to determine the information so a decision can be made about Wasatch, Troy, do you want to review a little bit of that information and that narrative at the bottom?
Yeah. So with the Wasatch, we can add it in the roughly based on what we drove this year would be essentially roughly the same as next year, because we're still taking the same path from Centennial down into the school and then back to the compound, so it'll cut a little bit. But there's roughly 4,600 miles ineligible with 28,345 minutes. So kind of just doing the simple math, if we're just looking at just driver hours and miles per gallon in fuel to run the two buses would be a rough estimate of 17,500 for those two, and then we just did one and cut in half for a rough estimate.
Troy, can you remind me how many Wasatch buses are there right now?
There's two right now.
And with the school being moved, I understood that at least one route was going to be eliminated. Is that correct?
So right now, as it sits with the 1.5 mile boundary, last I checked, with the geocoding placement, all the students, we had 2 eligible students. You need 10 students per state-funded route.
Okay, so that would just be one route then?
That would be 0 routes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it doesn't meet the requirement of 10 for a state-funded route.
Okay, so there are, so if we have any buses to Wasatch, they would both be ineligible. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So question is, and again, just using Wasatch as an example. Currently, there are part of those routes are ineligible, right? Which I'm guessing we put those on because of hazard, right? I don't know why else.
Yeah.
So, and my concern is 1450 is where those ineligible routes are. Kids are still using that to get to the new site, right? So I guess my question is, why, it's hard to know, right? The decision to make those ineligible routes available, what's changing now to make them unavailable? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because they're still on the same route to the new site.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just
So,
changing the
distance.
boundaries to where
Yeah.
it's, you know, to where we can get squeezed funding out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like those are examples of where we're just taking a hit on the time.
Yeah.
And not the miles.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so I'm guessing like these courtesy stop, right, that's just because, oh, you're getting these kids that are far.
Yeah, because that's still on the direct path, so each time where you would see the courtesy, or the, yeah, because you got courtesy ineligible. So those two are eligible, and then that one would go to courtesy stop for the one, and then getting back on path to school, because we don't go down that road, it's dangerous for us to drive down.
Right, that's that one.
So that's why that would be the direct path, so we just take a hit on that last ineligible stop right there, because that one up there would be considered courtesy.
It's on the path.
Is there a way to see these large? I don't know how Meg got them large.
Meg is a wizard.
Well,
You did that.
do you know what? Because I requested access to edit. You have to just click on it like this.
You could also make a copy, and then
So,
you could edit it.
Tell me where to push, which.
Okay, right, stop, right there. You click on one of those.
And then drag the corner out.
Oh, you have to have access. We don't have access.
We don't have access.
We didn't request.
You can make a copy, and then you could edit
Oh,
it.
nice. All the tricks. So it sounds like, Jared, what you're saying though is, it would be great if we had a procedure in place where
Correct.
these decisions were made consistently, transparently.
For instance,
throughout
two
the
recent
district.
decisions that came through the board, one related to Dixon and providing transportation
Yes.
to Dixon.
Yeah.
And then in a recent past that I recall, Amelia Earhart, there were decisions made that after a school community council had and a principal had advocated that there was a hazardous area, somehow a decision was made by the board and approval was made. And it's really not, it's not clear on that procedure, and we need direction, and we'd like to take some things, you know, some samples to the policy committee, so that decisions like this aren't solely based on the advocacy of one neighborhood or one school community council, as opposed to filtering it through some sort of a decision-making process.
Would we, sorry, would we once we put this policy into place, would we look at all of these again? Okay.
We could.
I think it would be smart.
Mhm.
Decide.
I think that was the idea behind this, was you put the policy in place and then you need to reevaluate.
Not necessarily going to be grandfathered in.
Right.
Correct.
And I don't know that you necessarily put in place the policy and then immediately do that, or you say there's a year, right, lapse of we've got to get ready for this because according to this, these routes no longer qualify based on that particular policy, and you have some time for some input. There's almost two separate decisions here, because you have right now 2 ineligible routes, right, for Wasatch. So are you going to continue those? Is that something you want to just grandfather over and continue that process, or say no to based on this information? And then do we want to also look at the bigger picture of?
So we have a couple of things, right? We need to be looking at Wasatch specifically, because we need to make a decision before the beginning of the year.
So that's where we're with the way our funding works. With all this information that was pulled in our A1 report that we turned in November 1, that's for the funding for next school year. So you can look at it as it's already funded for next year, but then if we run it again this year, the following year there's no funding.
Okay.
Right, so it's like
So it would go
one
ineligible
time.
this year, it'd be pulled out of next
It's like
for
they
one-time
held us,
money.
they're not holding us harm, they're being held harm. I can't
Or we
speak
could
right now.
you've got it.
Yeah, held harm was.
Yeah, it would just be identified on my A1 as ineligible, and then
Okay.
it would be pulled out of the following year's funding.
Okay, Lisa, and then Meg.
And I'm happy to hear that this could go to policy committee, because I do think while it is an extra expense, as long as we're intentional to say these are the times when actually we feel like the benefit to our students and families are worth that expense
Yeah.
or not, but just having a consistent and clear way we make that decision and communicate that is what you're saying we need
As
to
Troy
have.
and I talked, we can't quite explain, we don't have the history from our experience
Right.
of those 13, why those choices were made. We can think of
Correct.
2 that during our
Okay.
tenure, but beyond that, I'm not certain
Okay.
exactly how anyone concluded and made that approval.
And can part of that policy be that we document the reasons? I mean, I feel like it would be nice if we could go back and say, okay, here's the discussion and that might help us.
That's
I
a
don't-
great idea, so
like-
that we have that very
Context.
public,
'Cause
so,
then when-
and we don't lose that information.
Right, and then when you do have like your community council, I mean, these concerns came up because the community council at Wasatch is working on their Safe Routes to School plan. Or have looked at all the areas, right? And I will say, it's not clear to them which buses they're losing or not, and so I think that shows we do need to, start messaging before the school opens, what is the bus plan, right? Because they're not quite clear about what the bus plan is. So, and I do think before this, there was understanding there may be one bus for those 2 students, and that a courtesy stop could maybe happen for a few of those most northeast students that have to kind of use, but that maybe, sounds like that might not, technically that's not the case, right? At least funding wise. So,
Did you have another comment, or was that the one that you wanted to make when I said Lisa and then Meg?
no, that was it, just
Okay.
that, yeah, a piece of this too is to communicate clearly, especially when we're having a school at a new site, what the expectations are for these families that are used to having a bus to get down. Even though the school's closer, the dangerous parts, they're still navigating to that new site. Does that make
Yep.
sense? And so, having to
Yeah.
have that conversation with them,
And it sounds like we have this coming school year to kind of work that, not that we want to push it off, but we already have funding for the upcoming 2020, 24, 25, is that correct? And so the next step, it sounds to me like, is that we need to have some procedure/policies that we need to look
Correct.
at. And was the idea to bring in, I don't know, I've read so many things in the last 48 hours, to look at other districts and maybe see what they're doing to help us create this policy. So is there anything that we as the board need to be doing, or will that be something that's brought to policy committee?
I believe we'll just come to policy committee once we have a draft and then input from board members about that. I think the clarity we're seeking today is, do we proceed with those 2 bus routes for the 24-25 school year, giving notice that we've got to make a decision for the 25-26 school year.
And they're not moving in until probably January 31st, right? So it'll be in the middle of the
So
school
we'll have
year.
half funding for the following year.
Right.
So, okay, so what's the direction that we as a board would like to give? And I want to bring Rebecca in on this. Rebecca, I don't know why I'm yelling at the computer. Rebecca, do you have anything you want to add before we?
Turn around.
No, I'm just sitting here laughing and giggling at you guys. It's funny to listen to, but no, I don't really have anything to add. I think it's I'm happy. I'm looking forward to the policy. I think it's a great thing to review all the bus routes. But as far as going forward with the 2, I feel like I'm okay going forward with those for now, as long as everyone really truly understands they're temporary and that we're reviewing and that we may revoke them.
Thank you. That's my thought. Does anybody have any different thoughts or feelings about the 2 bus routes specifically for Wasatch for 2024-25?
no, we just, need to be clear that that we're
This
still,
is-
they're gonna be there for the first half of the year, and then we'll have to get in alignment with the policy that we pass.
So we just need to have very clear, very intentional messaging, particularly to the families who will be affected by that, correct? Okay.
What can work, communications can work with like Ruth Van and get that going.
What, any other questions or comments on this? Thank you, Jared and Troy, for all of your work on this. We appreciate it. This was good. Good discussion. It made things a little more clear for me as we thought about it. So,
And you were done
thank
6 minutes early.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for the map.
The next
You can
issue
have
might
a
take
water
time.
bottle.
We're up for the next item too.
Oh,
yeah,
never
you're
mind.
right.
We'll just hang out.
You don't go anywhere. Okay, so that was number 8. Number 9, boundary proposals for Heather Lane and Osprey Towns Park. Take it away.
So just as a reminder, in our most recent all-day board meeting, we shared some concerns that many have been aware for some time, that there's a boundary dispute issue on Heather Lane where there's been a lack of clarity. Additionally, we've identified the new development called Osprey Towns, where there's also a disconnect on that boundary because of the current boundary. And we're here today to share with you a couple of maps for reference and a couple of options for you to consider. with a couple of loose recommendations that you might consider as a board.
Do you want me to project these?
Yes, if you could. There's
Okay.
if we could go to the Heather Lane, there are two images for Heather Lane that we'd like to share with you.
Option 1.
Yeah,
And option 2.
and option 1 and option 2. So again, for reference, Heather Lane's down here in the southwest quarter of the city. Currently, Heather Lane, we have within our own internal documentation, where that boundary sits is in flux, whether it's to the north or to the south. You have a couple of options to identify Heather Lane. All homes on Heather Lane, as you can see, there are just a few students that live and reside on that. Option 1 would be to have them go to Spring Creek Elementary School, and then if you could share option 2 would be to have Heather Lane be all of Sunset View's boundary. Option 3 could be you leave it the same and have the north go to Sunset View and the south go to Spring Creek, and allow everyone to just remain and be grandfathered into their current residence, or excuse me, their current school residence. But these images there show you those potential options.
Yeah, can we
Superintendent?
just say, these are messed up boundaries. What the crap?
They should be
This
reviewed.
tiny little rectangle.
That's why we're redoing it, Terry.
Oh my God.
Aren't you so excited?
It's just so crazy.
As board member McCabe
3
is describing.
different schools, and this is in the Franklin South neighborhood. I just.
We recognize that potentially this could be addressed in the larger potential future boundary study. In the interim, though, we need clarity for you to make a decision about Heather Lane.
So I'm going to put my voice out there that I would go with the bigger blue ones than the other one. And I'll tell you why. Okay. There's more blue dots that are going to Spring Creek. That's my suggestion.
So the blue dots could also represent multiple students.
Oh,
Or
I thought
any of the dots.
Spring Creek. What do okay, so tell me what they
So,
represent.
no, I mean, as far as like students, so those 3 blue dots in the Spring Creek area, it could be 3 kids, it could be 6 kids. I'd have to go back
but
and
the blue
look
dot
at
represents that they go to
at
Spring
least.
Creek.
Correct.
And that's what I'm saying is that there's 4.
I guess, yeah, because I'm looking at this, like the red dot could be 4 kids on one dot.
There's more blue dots in that area than there are red and yellow
So they'd be
dots.
going with their Spring Creek peers.
Yes.
So as you can see, there are 3 different schools that are attended by individuals in that short little block. And Superintendent, if you could go to the other document that shows the options, excuse me, Bonnie, if you could. There's another document that's attached in there.
Says
that
options. Yeah. This is May 28th boundary discussion.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's the May 28th.
Yep, that's the one.
So
I
related
apologize
to
for interrupting. Can you guys turn the screen around for me?
Oh,
No.
sorry, Rebecca.
Oh, you missed the map.
Thank you.
So currently 7 students, I apologize, I wrote students, but there are 7 households that attend 3 different schools. And so your options could be have them go to Spring Creek. All students would then ride a bus to Spring Creek. Option 2 would be to identify this as the entire street go to Sunset View. All students would then be within walking distance of Sunset View. Option 3, split it down the middle. Those on the north would walk to Sunset View. Those on the south would be bused to Spring Creek. And our recommendation is that you designate all of Heather Lane as part of Sunset View's boundary. However, still allow the individuals in their current placement to be bused to Spring Creek.
Because they're currently being bused there.
Because they're currently being bused there.
But
we would allow them to continue in that.
Until they just phase out,
Until
and
they
then we
phase
just
out.
would no longer provide that
This would be a
transportation,
courtesy
right?
stop.
Well, let's be
No,
clear.
ineligible.
These are apartments. These people might not even be here tomorrow.
Okay, so Heather Lane is apartment.
It's all apartments.
All
That's correct.
apartments.
All 4plexes.
They're all renters.
I
There are
guess
no owners.
The continuation to bus, I guess my question is if your neighbor is being bused to an out-of-boundary school as a courtesy stop, right? And then you're like, wait, so if we switch to that school, will the bus also, I'm unclear. Like,
Yeah.
could we potentially just keep busing students to an out-of-boundary school?
No, so what would happen is you could request, say, space eligible request, right? So you
Okay.
could say, well, I want a permit to Spring Creek since this bus is already coming, but if that kid is a 6th grader and that busing ends, then that busing would not continue as of that, at that point. Does that make sense?
But what gave the 6th grader the courtesy bus, but you don't get it? It's just because
Because
now
they've
we've
already
changed the
they've been
boundaries.
It's because we've
I
changed
see.
the boundaries,
Okay,
so
sorry.
they've already established
But
themselves
like
as a
Harry
student.
said,
Yeah.
we
And we're
don't
gonna-
know what.
And we're gonna look at all of
We
these
have no
boundaries
idea if
anyway in the
they're gonna be
future,
yes.
so for now.
But
that
we
would
just
be-
needed to have a
Yeah,
decision for
okay,
right now.
thank you.
Okay.
And then that
I
doesn't
changed my
impact the
mind.
busing at all.
That's the problem.
Oh, I raised my hand 'cause I'm
It's a
like-
highly transient area. People come and go all the time. So having 3 different schools, just, I understand that there's 3 different schools.
And
that kids go
it's
to.
close to Sunset View, is that right? I'm challenged in a lot of different
Oh,
ways.
they're
They're within walking
Okay.
distance of
But
Sunset
it is
View.
also in walking distance to Sunset View.
Okay.
And they wouldn't have to, they just go underneath the pass, the I-15, and then just walk on down 600 South.
So, just
You
to,
can't
just
see my house
to
on
help
this
me
thing.
understand, why did, is it because right now it's either Spring Creek or Sunset View, is that right? And so the reason we're going with Sunset View as opposed to Franklin is because that Franklin isn't even in those boundaries right now, is that correct?
That's correct.
Except
Okay.
that little rectangle.
Let's just make another little rectangle, Franklin.
Which I think the rectangle hopefully will be addressed in the boundary study.
The problem is that if they walk to Franklin, you know it's closer, they would have to cross the railroad track.
Right,
And
right.
Union Pacific are not cooperative, and they have their own
Block it all the time,
schedule.
And then you have kids crawling underneath the rail.
I see
Exactly.
kids walking with their parents every day when I drop my daughter off. I see them walking across there. So
Yeah.
I like the option that you recommended for a variety of reasons, but one of them is when the kids are closer and within walking distance to their school, I just feel like it's a better, and even for these students who are in apartments and who may be more transient maybe than families who own, not transient, but they move more than families who might own the home. I think it's better to have them within walking distance rather than having Spring Creek where they then have to figure out a way to get there to pick up their children. So I
All
think
the way
that's
across
what
town.
that's what I would prefer. How about anybody have any thoughts about that?
One thing to remember, we still have to have a public hearing on this,
Yeah.
and
And
the
a schedule.
families,
And we have that also,
the
yeah.
families can give us input about what they want.
That's right.
So we're preparing for that public meeting, and would you like for us to share all of these options at that public
Yeah.
meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
Rebecca, do you have anything?
Did you hear me?
So just to be clear, we're not gonna go with any one particular recommendation. What we're gonna do instead is just share all the options. Is that correct?
But have our.
We'll still, generally in a public hearing, you still give your recommendation as to what that is, but you hear all of the input that comes through. So the public hearing for this one will be on June 6th.
Okay, and I apologize, I wasn't following very well. Did we decide to go ahead with Jared's recommendation or something different?
It's outlined on a paper,
We cannot officially make a decision until after the public hearing.
But if you would like for us to change the recommendation, we're seeking that input tonight.
Yeah.
no, I like the recommendation.
I like the recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, then I'm good to go.
So one thing really quickly, I was looking for this, I was putting together something for neighborhood meetings, and I went to the website to find information about the 2 meetings, and I couldn't find it. I don't know if it's on there, and again, I'm challenged in a lot of different ways. If we could figure out a way to get that on there where people could find it, that would be great.
We have personally delivered all of because you're required to send it through the mail to all of the households that
It affects.
It affects.
Okay, thank you.
All 7.
And then, so that was one of them, but then we have Heather Lane, we have Osprey Towns.
Well, where is the public hearing gonna be?
So it will be at Sunset View because we have to change it from Franklin and Caleb, or from the Franklin Community Center because they called and canceled.
Okay.
And Communications has reissued that information out to families last week.
Is it
So
gonna be
again,
Franklin or Sunset View?
June 6th at Sunset View.
Oh, it's at
Sunset.
Franklin Elementary, I'm sorry, you're right.
Alright.
The other one is at Sunset View.
Yeah, it's a shame it couldn't be, cause it's
I know, it's like
right
right
next
there.
door.
No.
So you guys still need to do a presentation on Osprey.
Osprey Towns, yeah,
correct,
we
is
can
that
do it
right?
very quickly.
Okay, go ahead.
Bonnie, can you share, there's 2 other images of aerial shots of Osprey Towns. We just want to give you some reference. So this is the Osprey Towns development. Lakeview Parkway, the lake over here, fitting color. Current boundary, 680 West. As you follow it through, you'd see that it separates entire buildings which have up to 5 or 6 units within each building. There's a need for the board as part of, whether it's part of a future study or not. Currently, we do not have any current households that attend any of our schools within, but as you can see, there are phases that they're working through, and in the gray you can see the number of parcels that are there. But the challenge right now is 680 West. We would have to do some sort of a jog, and we'd like to share with you a couple of options that you might consider. What I'd like to do though, before we share those options, is share this image. So again, here's Osprey Towns, but also over here you're going to see there's a new development called Heron's Landing, and you can see the parcels that have already been designated for single-family homes. Just for context, again, 680 West is not a natural line. You'd have to make several different adjustments. Bonnie, if you could go back to that May 28th document. There's several options that we'd like to share with the community that night, and we'd like your input about that as well. Option 1 would be to designate the entire development into a single school boundary, just Osprey Towns and all of those single-family homes. You can consider a north-south boundary within Osprey Towns at 1870 South. You might consider keeping the existing boundary at 680 West and then do that little jog through the subdivision. Any household that had a house number 680 West, less than 680 West would go to Franklin. Anything 680 West or higher, that number 690 whatever, would then go to Sunset View. You might even consider a new boundary further west of 680 that might capture that entire neighborhood, or you could delay a decision until the larger boundary study is completed. But there is a need right now because the developer has indicated a school boundary that conflicts with our current understanding. They've indicated that all houses would go to Sunset View, and right now at 680 West is that boundary, and we encourage the board to consider designating Osprey Towns into the Franklin Elementary School boundary because of the new growth to the west that we're anticipating. Sunset View's enrollment will continue to grow with that new growth. Here's an opportunity potentially for you to consider adding some households that could attend Franklin Elementary just within the Osprey Towns development.
And all of these students would have to be bused no matter what. Regardless
To
of
Sunset
Franklin
View
or
or to
Sunset View.
Franklin,
Doesn't matter.
because they're out of the 1.5 mile, so it would be an eligible route.
Is that correct for Sunset View?
Funded.
Really, right? You can say that.
Yeah.
And so what we're looking for here, once again, is our opinions about whether or not this recommendation that you have made should move forward. Is that correct for the meeting?
To share with the meeting, at the
Okay.
meeting, right? And then we'll obviously get feedback from the community, and then you as a board will make a decision at that point.
Okay. What
From what I understand, the only people who live in these are either retired or they're very young and don't have kids yet.
Okay. But they may have kids.
In the
Correct.
future.
So in like
I'm
6
in
years.
favor of the recommendation that was put.
Same.
Me too. Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Are you suggesting then that if you put Osprey Towns into the Franklin division that you're also gonna create a boundary at 680 West at some point, or?
There currently is one, and we could maintain that 680 West boundary. This
Or-
recommendation is
no,
just...
I mean the one, sorry, if I go back to the map.
The bigger subdivision south.
The Heron's Landing one.
Yeah, the Heron's Landing, because,
Where would Heron's Landing go?
Sunset View.
Sunset
At this point, it would
View.
go to
Yes,
Sunset
okay.
View.
looking at, this is not the right one.
How far, do we know how far out they are from the building for Heron's Land? Like, is this coming school year or the next school year that we
They're
think they'll be
digging
done?
holes.
I believe they're preparing some foundations of a phase. I mean,
So
the
it could be
infrastructure
within
is
the next
there
year, too.
right now, so.
So we probably need to figure that out.
So I'm looking at like, it would be maybe like 750 west possibly, or 800 west. Are you proposing?
At this point, we're only recommending you just address here.
Right.
And not tackle the larger thing until the boundary issue,
study.
until the boundary study is resolved.
Okay.
Because at that point, you might do what the superintendent's suggesting,
Okay,
perhaps you
gotcha.
create a boundary
Okay.
here at 730
Okay.
West. But for now, we need to be able to provide clarity to anyone who's beginning to register.
Okay.
Okay, because Sunset View just, Sunset View is the other school
Correct.
Yeah.
in this area.
Well,
Sunset
here,
View
they
is
go to Sunset View, which is
below.
over there.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
Any
you.
additional questions?
Rebecca? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
No additional questions
Okay.
from me.
All right, so the recommendation is to keep your recommendation, I believe is what we said. Is that correct? Or our direction is to keep the recommendation?
So our staff will be prepared to share this at that meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
And can we get a thank you very
Yes,
much for
thank
everything
you.
that you guys, all the efforts you put into this. Can we get a clarification? June 6th meeting is at 6 p.m. and which one is the June 6th meeting? It's for
Heather Lane.
Heather Lane.
Heather Lane.
To be held at Franklin Elementary.
Franklin Elementary.
And
And then
then
the
June
Osprey
10th?
Towns is at June 10th at Sunset View Elementary.
And the letters that we sent out was opposite.
Oh, it's the opposite, just kidding. Okay, glad
Wait.
to see, that's why we have
The
communications
schools are
here.
the opposite, or the
The dates, the Osprey Towns is June 6th, and
Okay.
Heather Lane is June 10th.
Okay.
But the locations are accurate.
What is that?
But where they're hosting the meetings are accurate.
Yes.
So Heather Lane is Franklin, at Franklin, right?
So Google Calendar is correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we are ahead of time. You guys get an extra snack for getting this ahead of time.
Wow.
All right, number 10, review of boundary resolution. This is for Devin.
All right, this is, we'll nickname this the Bramble Bill. So this is the bill Bramble put into place to allow us to capture Provo High's land. It currently resides, we've had a fascinating discussion and discovery of how much of Provo is actually in Alpine's tax district. So we're working at the, Derek Marshall at the law firm is helping me. There's 3 different paths that we have to go. This is the first one. The bill, we went in and read the bill. It is specific to a single city school district that finished a high school in 2018. And so it doesn't name Provo, but it's pretty obvious that it is Provo. It allows us to capture that land into our district, into our tax district. Not that it creates additional tax revenue for us, because we would be then paying ourselves. But it actually brings that land in. But we I didn't realize that he put into the bill that it had to be done by June 1st. So luckily we were right within our window. So this just allows us to do that for the county. Now there's a couple of other pieces that are going to be coming into play. The city is annexing some of the land that's just south of Provo High. South of Provo High. And that is also currently in Alpine School District's boundaries, but because they are annexing, we can do that within 60 days of the annexation and bring that in. The other pieces are, we've already met, I have not, but Wendy and the Alpine superintendent and the business administrator out there have met, and they have no problems with us recapturing. It is in Provo City land. It's just the tax district needs to be redrawn. And that piece of that will just require a meeting between Rebecca and the board president at Alpine, and a 4/5 vote by Alpine and us to allow that to happen. So there's 3 different things that are in play. This one tonight is just the Provo School District, or the Provo High School land that is currently in the run.
And we are on target for getting the June 1st deadline?
Yep.
Okay.
We just had to vote on it tonight.
Okay.
In the business meeting, and then we can get that filed with the county as soon as Rebecca gets back. You're gonna be back before June 1st, right, Rebecca?
I think she gets back tonight.
I get back early Thursday morning, so I should be able to. But do I need to meet with the president before June 1st?
Nope, this is just to sign the resolution to add Provo High onto our boundaries. So
got it. I'll stop by on Thursday.
The other pieces are later in the year. We're working on those right now.
Okay. No problem. I'll be back in time.
Any questions or comments on this one?
Thank you for doing it.
Yes, thanks for taking care of that. Rebecca, anything?
No.
Nothing for me.
Okay. All right, thank you. We are ahead of schedule. Number 11, budget update. Devin, you're up again.
I am, and I'm just gonna put my slideshow up on the screen.
And you have until 5:45.
Sweet. Or earlier, if everybody wants a chance to stretch their legs before. Sorry, we still have the large but purchase request. We're gonna pass it around. Okay. It's not liking my. So I sent out the revised budget last night. I'm still waiting for county numbers so I can finalize our tax rates. There's a couple of discussions included in that, and we'll address it kind of as we go. This up so nobody has to run my presentation, and then I'll turn Rebecca around. All right, can you see okay? I won't get in the way. Okay, so the first piece hasn't changed from last time. The issue right now is that the county over the weekend decreased our valuation down to $9.9 billion. So I don't know exactly where they're gonna land. And the certified tax rate is based on this valuation that they give us. So right now, the rate is gonna probably be a little higher based on what the valuations are, because what they do, depending on what kind of levy it is, so the basic levy is set by the state, so that just is what it is. The debt levy is based on what our debt payments are for next year. And then the other levies are based on the amount of revenue that we are requesting. So it's a good time for this discussion. This is the year that we would be doing a truth in taxation. And with the rates possibly going down, it might still be a good idea to go out and do an inflation capture in our truth in taxation. Most districts actually file to do a truth in taxation every year as they get these rates finalized to make sure that they've got all the revenue that they need in order to do all of their operating. This year was a lot tighter. Losing the federal revenue made a difference, and being able to keep up on some of those services are a challenge. I've captured just about everything, but it's also based on interest staying as high as it is and bringing in a certain amount of revenue. If there's any adjustments based on enrollment, that could cause issues for us next year. And so it's a discussion that might be worth having. It's not necessarily a guarantee that we will, but it's the possibility that we could, in case some of those numbers come in. So, I mean, we'd have to decide. I have to have our note to the county at sometime the first part of June.
So the county changed the valuation or the tax rate?
The county changed the valuation right now.
Okay.
So this valuation that we had last week or 2 weeks ago for our meeting changed over the weekend, because it was this on Thursday. When I looked again yesterday as I was finalizing everything, they'd lowered it to the 9.9. But I don't want to change it again, because it could change again based on that they won't finalize it for us to be able to go and do any entry until next week. So that piece of it in the budget that you will approve in June 11th will include the new rates. And based on whether we want to go do the inflationary adjustment, or if we want to wait and do it for next year, or if we want to stay on the odd years. This would be the first year in 8 years that we haven't done it on the every other year. So keeping up with that that pattern is not necessarily a bad idea, and we could make it a really minor change to be able to keep that schedule going.
So when do you need to know that by? Like, when do we have to?
We'll need to know probably before we adopt the budget on the 11th. So you can send me an email, and we can make adjustments, and then you can vote on it that night.
Okay. To do truth and taxation.
To do truth and taxation. Okay. And then we can have numbers of what that would look like and what the rate would be. Because right now, with even the valuation that they have in there, I'm projected to drop our tax rates. So here's a couple of our concerns. If we drop it and then go up again next year, that is a really difficult thing for citizens to understand. Is, well, I paid less and now all of a sudden I'm paying more. Yeah. Keeping it fairly steady and even is actually a little bit easier budget-wise for most people.
So we would move the tax rate to.
So this is this year's. No, I would make it lower than that. I don't want. This is high for me, and you can see over the last 10 years we've been between 7 and the 007 and 008, based on the year and the valuation. But when you look at the valuation of the property, that's where your difference is. So we were bringing in a lot less revenue, but the valuation of the property was less as well. So, anyway, we'll keep going because we could all get us lost in property tax discussions. But this would be about what it is. This is our amount that's set by the state, and then this is what our maximum is voted by the voters is our voted leeway. This we do have the ability to go up, and it might not be a bad idea. We've talked about it in Finance Committee before. That helps us capture a little bit more of the state revenue that is certified based on what our maximum rate is. And then this, with the valuation going down, this is probably going to go down just a little bit, but we have no control over that. That's the amount of our rate that is given to charter schools. So we never actually see the money. We just have to book it at the end of the year as revenue and expense. Yep, it's a pass-through, just like our RDAs are a pass-through. And then again, that we want to keep our revenue that we're receiving at even. That's one of the requirements that we have with our property taxes, is that we don't bring in more revenue. If we decide to change that, it will be very minor. I don't envision anything major. And again, this is one of the things that has helped us the last couple of years, is the amount of interest that we've brought in, just with our bond proceeds and our property tax collections having been higher over the last couple of years. It's allowed us to capitalize on the higher interest rates. But that is still a very volatile, very uncomfortable revenue to depend on for someone who is really conservative in their budgeting of revenue and expenses. I don't really like to use that as the way to play. And I use play in a very loose term. It's just the way to balance things by that interest rate number. Because if it was the same way as it is this year, next year we'll bring in a lot more, but I can't guarantee that, and I don't want to have expenses based on revenue that we may not get. We've already gone through the enrollment and breakdown, so we'll just start on the all funds. So this, right now, we currently are looking at a budget of $253 million for all funds. Last year was a little bit over $300 million, and a lot of that is just our construction projects that are ending. And I know that there's some consternation sometime about the change in fund balance, but a lot of this is planned fund spend down. Like on the food services, this number actually needs to be closer to 1.5 in the end. So if there are one-time purchases next year, we will come back to the board for approval to increase that budget so we can get those down. Likely there will be some things that are added into that to help bring that down. Yes?
Can you remind me what central services includes?
That's a great thing. I'll just run through all of them real quick so you know what. Yeah. So our instructional services are anything having to do with teachers and students. Our support the support staff for students, those are our counselors, those are our social workers. So basically anything that has to do with the physical and emotional health of our students. and supporting them, counselors, all of those. Instructional staff, those are our people that help teachers. So our instructional coaches, a lot of our district office staff, they're here to help the schools, not necessarily district admin in general. District administration, those are things that are district-wide. So Wendy and I are, and all the board, they're required to be coded in school administration, although there still is a debate, a regular debate within the state, because it's always been that the business administrator's been in central services, but then they moved it, and now they're talking about, oh, we probably need to move it again, but we haven't been told.
So
that
school
currently
administration, not district administration?
So this district administration is the district admin.
Okay.
And that is the piece where it's really just those who are supervised by the board and the ones that are in the district administration, not the ones that are necessarily supervised by the superintendent and providing services to the schools.
Okay, thank you.
The school administration, of course, is your secretaries and your principals at the schools. The central services are your payroll, human resources, finance, purchasing, warehouse, technology administration. So there's like our inventory specialist, Chad and JP, all of our admin down in technology that are supporting the district as a whole. And then operation and maintenance, those are our maintenance and our utilities, our supplies, and custodial. And then student transportation, of course, is Troy. So, and a lot of them are just in the general fund, but there are some that'll carry through on the other funds. This year, we currently have there will be some expenses, although we're still in the debate mode on the capital projects, the money that we gave to the schools. Some of that has been instruction, but as long as overall in the fund, not by fund, they don't look by function, they're looking more overall in the fund. So you'll see the general fund is even projected to go. So what that is, that's our OPEB. So we have finally hit the sunset mark on our OPEB benefits that we had had in a fund balance restricted to the OPEB benefits, and so we're now at a spot where we can start pulling some of that down every year. So we won't bring in new revenue to cover that. We are actually now able to use some of that fund balance that we saved over several years to be able to pay for those, and those are our retiree or the lifetime benefit that we granted to some employees, and then the prorated benefit. Any questions on this page? And we'll just keep trucking along. So this, I created this one a little bit different. This actually just shows the amount that we're spending on salaries and benefits across all funds. So this is not just the general fund, this is all the funds altogether. So there's our $253 million number. And you can see that a significant amount of our expenses go to salaries and benefits. So you have about 140 million of the 253. And the only reason that is different is because you have the 40,000,095, those are our projects. As those projects finish, which might not happen for a few years, but that number would go down and our percentage spent on salaries and benefits would go up.
Can I ask? And
absolutely.
That's what you probably just said this. I'm just so
sorry. Oh, you're good.
But under purchase services, when I see that like kind of 2-year big jump.
Yep. So this is all construction.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
So the other things that are included in our purchase services are repairs, travel, subs. All of those are in purchase services. So there will be expenses that will continue to come out of that every year.
And in 24-25, we still have construction going in at least 2 schools. So I'm just curious about that big decrease in number.
But most of our construction, like Shoreline, will be mostly done in June. There will still be some, the retainage and some of those.
Will be done.
Correct.
Okay.
So half of the year, so half of Wasatch, a little bit more than half of Wasatch will be done. So there will only be a small amount, plus we have what's left of Tempview for this phase that they're on right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we'll just go fund by fund until...
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You can ask as many questions as you can.
No. But just help me understand, so at the bottom there, that basically roughly
negative
29
$28 million. So that's a lot of things that people have a difficult time understanding. We
Yeah.
had a couple questions.
And I want to be able to explain it. That's why I'm asking you, because I
Yep.
think I know, and then I have no words.
So
to
if
tell.
you look over here,
Uh-huh.
back a couple of years when we got the bond proceeds. So the bond proceeds are all booked in the year that they're received, and they're
Right, they
counted
come
as fund
once.
balance. And as we spend it each year, that's our proceeds from the bond.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So it's not like there isn't money there.
Right.
The money is there to cover that. It's
Right.
just
Correct.
coming
And
from
it was
the
all
bond. It's
recorded
not-
as
yes.
revenue.
And
in
it's
one
actually
part.
easier
Do
to
it
see.
twice. Thank you.
It'll be actually, this is easier to see. So this is our fund balance beginning. So as you go through, so this is what adds up to the 28 million. And you can see 4.8 million of that is for the capital projects fund, and 21 million of that is shoreline and Wasatch. That's the Municipal Building Authority Fund. And at the end of next year, we plan on having the 6 million, and what that is that's the money that we will pay back for the QSCB bond from 2006.
Okay.
So it's not more construction funds that we've got, but we do have that balance that's in there for the QSCB bond that we transfer money. It's not an expense. We just put money into a holding account when we have for the last 17 years, 18 years. And then once the bond matures, then we make one balloon payment. So next year, you'll see a great big $6.4 million payment on the budget in order to pay off that bond. Okay, so here's the general fund. This is a 5-year look, and so you can see this revenue it includes the ESSER funds, but it also includes a significant amount of interest. And so when you're looking at it, you think, oh, we're going to lose a ton of money. Well, our expenses are 157 million plus the transfer. So what this transfer includes is it includes a $1 million transfer at the end of this year to the self-insurance fund. It includes a $200,000 transfer to the schools to cover their fee waivers. And then it includes the $7.7 million transfer to the capital fund to cover some of the MBA payment, and which is counted as an expense in the capital fund. So with this balance here that we're adding to, that will be assigned to be able to do those one-time salary things that we talked about. And hopefully, with if we do a truth in taxation, we can commit that could be ongoing at some point. Any questions about the general fund? You can see overall, if you look at, and we'll show it on the next, I created a nice little graph showing our instruction services. So you'll see that a lot of our expenses have stayed pretty flat or have gone down. So our district administration has gone down just because some of our positions have been eliminated that were in the district administration. Plus some of those have been shifted to actually show what their actual duties are, so we can make sure that we are actually reporting what each function is spending. Your instruction has gone down a little bit just because most of our ESSER funding went to instruction. And then the rest of them, the student support stayed pretty much the same. Instructional staff went up a little bit because of the coaches, instructional coaches at the schools, and same with school district administration. I expect these to go up every year a certain degree, but there are, this one is a little bit bigger than normal just because of those additional principals. But that was a switch. In a lot of cases, it was a switch from instructional staff over to school administration. Because otherwise, I would expect this instructional staff to have gone up a little bit more this year. You can also see central services went down just a little bit, and part of that is because there are a couple of other positions within the district office that were eliminated. Okay, the rest of it will be smooth sailing unless we have questions. Foundation, we've always budgeted just a pretty large amount just in case, because legally we can't go over budget even in the foundation. And so if we are trending that will go higher than what we have in the budget, we will add money to the budget. It's one that is it's a little nebulous on the requirements on a foundation just because they're not district operated as opposed to having a separate board. But because they are a related entity, we still have to report them on our financials. Okay, Fund 21, this is our student activities. These are our fees that will come up. These fees will change again next year. They have not decided on the funding formula for the extra money that they're giving us so we can eliminate the general fee and the curricular and co-curricular fees that are used in a classroom. I just know that they're giving us about a third over a 3-year period of what all the districts create or collect in fines. So it's not going to cover all those fines. That will be something that is an additional cost to us next year. Most of it is all supplies that they buy for the classroom, but the other biggest part is student travel. So that's what that $915,000 is. So we generally, because a lot of times they've brought in donations over the years, we generally we'll go into fund balance every year to make sure that those are spent. It really should be going into fund balance every year or breaking even.
So this includes extracurricular activities?
Yep, this includes football, this includes all the sports, all the performing arts. So this is everything that happens at the schools. So our secondary schools still have their own checking accounts except for Independence. The elementary schools are all internal, and so they do all of their purchasing the same way all of the departments do. But the secondary schools still have the ability to take the fee and be able to spend from those fees a little easier. I know there's a very large amount of conversation within the BA group about centralizing it for all schools. There were reasons why we centralized the elementary schools, mostly audit purposes, but at the moment, I really like the schools to have a little bit of flexibility. And this is our pass-through taxes for our RDA and our charter school. It passes straight. In fact, we never actually see it. It's just an entry that they do. So that's about the amount that we expect, unless some of those RDAs are triggered, and we'll get information about that before we present the budget to you next year. And then the Municipal Building Authority, again, these are the costs associated with our 2 schools that we're building, the Wasatch and Shoreline. You can see here's the bond proceeds, which created a pretty large balance, and then now we're just spending it every year. So I know some people look at it and say, you're being really irresponsible with your funding. And I say, nope, we're spending money that we received years ago, and it's just the way that government accounting is done on those other financing sources. And then, wow, it's different. Okay, so these are just our bond schedules of kind of the waterfall of where we're looking at balance-wise and what our payments are. So this next year, on our GO bonds, and this is including the Municipal Building Authority. No, this one is. Yep, this is our lease revenue bond that we had from before, and our new lease revenue, so that you can see the colors of how much of it belongs to each of the bond. And if everything were in a perfect world and we never had to bond again in 2042, long after all of us are gone, we would be debt free. But that is not the realistic piece of it, but is the most responsible way of dealing with repairs and building schools. And then this is our capital projects fund. What this does include is some of the purchases, a couple of the purchases that we'll approve tonight. And next year, this also includes all the projects, which I have a list of on the next page, in which I will send out an email right now. These are our projects that are listed as our separate projects for the schools, and then we have the district-wide allowances that we have, so that we can keep up on some of those, flooring, painting, and There's playgrounds, so we can make sure we keep that pour and play up to date, and then small repairs. So we have things, pop up. Occasionally there are bigger things that pop up, but those will come to you. This one, the Canyon Crest Elementary, you'll be receiving an email from me tonight. That one, they need to start on Monday if they are going to be done before school starts. So I'll be asking for a preliminary approval for the project. This will actually be approved as part of the budget on June 11th, but we want to make sure that they can start on it. It also is more expensive than what is listed on there.
And I didn't know we were renovating Canyon Crest. So
it's just the front parking lot and the entrance and the sewer system, all of those where we've had several issues with flooding.
About the parking lot and the sewer.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's the outside of the school. So they're fixing the bus drop-off area. There's kind of a big dip in the middle of the parking lot that also needs to be addressed. But in order to get it done by the beginning of school, we just got the bids back today. So.
And we had that discussion previously. Is that correct?
Yep. We've had this conversation.
Sorry, I just didn't, when I said renovated, I was like, wait.
The whole school?
No, you're good. It's not the whole school. I mean, that is one of the things that's on our long-term list of schools that we need to address, but that's also one that we're waiting for the boundary study to kind of make sure that we're doing it properly. And then child nutrition services. This is over COVID, because we were reimbursed for every meal at the normal rate. We weren't required, and we don't usually get that level of revenue. Plus, we had a really hard time keeping and hiring employees. The fund balance went up. We just had an AR review from the state, and that we have to have a plan and a spend down plan. We're only supposed to have 3 months of revenue and as a fund balance. And then we have our self-insurance fund. So this thing, there's one other thing I actually need to address, just so you can see. So you can see these transfers out of the debt service fund there. So the way that the debt service levy is done is they base it on the percentage of revenue that we will receive. So that valuation sometimes is a little different. The last couple of years, this year and last year, it's actually projected to be more than what we need. The only other thing that we can do, I can't pay off any of our bonds early, because the only one that's close, because it was such a short-term bond, they disallow that, is technology purchases. So that will help us with our computer replacement for a couple of years, which helps free up some of that money. And then, so that was one of them. And then on the self-insurance fund, this is the transfer from this year that will help pay for some of the increase that we didn't pass on to the employees, so that we can use some of that balance that's coming in from interest and to help ease the burden of the employees. So currently we're projecting, right, not close, but close enough to those expenses, where it was a good guess for how much we're bringing in and how much we're spending on insurance for this year. So,
thank you.
And that is the end. Are there any other questions?
Great. A lot of work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I kept us
Thank you for all
right
that
on
work.
time.
Good job. And then you
I'm next to
are next for large purchase request number 12. Item number
And
12.
you're ahead of schedule, Devin.
I am
2 minutes ahead.
I try.
Good job. You also get an extra snack.
It's
right in front of you.
I'll come up with something to snack on. So first, let's start with Nate. Nate, do you want to talk about NWEA and powers, and then Michelle, you want to just take a second? We only have 5 minutes, unless you just want to, well, maybe we'll just let you ask them questions. So there are 5 items, on this request for tonight. One is the Power School modules. I am a squirrel. She likes to call me a squirrel, so I'll go from one end to the other. So the Power School modules, I included both the quote with Naviance and without. The vote later is with both. that piece of it will be paid by CTE. The other piece of it replaces some of our software that like the parent communication. That budget is currently already in the system. It also addresses the ongoing piece as opposed to the one-time implementation.
Sorry, every time we change screens.
No, you're good. It just scared me just a little. So that there's the two different options. One is the 212, and that is without the parent software. So the parent communication software has the ongoing I'll go down here. So it has the cost of $201,000 with ongoing costs of $141,992.52. This is what creates our early warning system that the state is requiring us to have in place. That is what this piece would do, and allow us to be able to have a lot more, what would be a good word, Nate, very free data. You know, the data that we could have for the students would be a lot richer than what we currently have, and be able to do it cross-sectionally by several different things that we're not allowed to do at this point. The other piece of that is the parent software, and the parent communication software is what Michelle presented on at the last time. That one actually, because it's $64,000 as a, nope, it's $23,000 with an ongoing cost of the $23,000. So their total amount for implementation would be $32,000. So that one does not have to be approved by the board because it's under the $50,000. But I'm just giving you that information so you have that. That will be something that is covered by our existing budget. The NWEA is the assessment tool that Nate presented very well about the last time. And do you have any questions?
I previously had a lot of questions that have been since cleared up, but I just want to say for public purposes that what I found out, and you can correct me, Nate, Wendy, if I'm wrong, is that is an assessment tool that will, for secondary, it's something that's very needed because they don't have anything currently, or they're creating it and recreating it over and over again, and this will help secondary schools. For elementary schools, it will replace Math assessments. These are all interim assessments, is this correct?
Yep.
It will replace Math, COGAT, and Wonders. And so that one of the concerns I had was that I don't want to give them another assessment tool, at least elementary schools, when they have so many other ones, but this should help take care of that, correct? And
wait, it replaces Wonders beginning, middle, and end of year testing?
The interim assessments that
Just
were part
the
of Wonders,
interim
that were part
assessment.
of Wonders. There's no requirement from the district
Right,
office that they do Wonders.
I understand.
They're doing these assessments. That's what the teachers are choosing to do.
But when we talk about Acadians,
Acadians is required by the state.
It's required by the state, so that's separate.
That's
So
a little
if you
different
are
type
doing
of-
Acadians beginning, middle, and end of year, would you also do NWE
Yes.
in the interim?
Yes.
Okay. But you would do Acadians ELA, Acadians Math, NWEA, is that both an ELA and a math assessment as well, interim assessment?
And we can do that, yes.
So you would do 2 of each in the beginning, and 2 of each in the middle, and 2 of each at the end.
We're also, with NWEA, there's a language usage assessment, and then science kicks in at 3rd grade.
Okay.
So it's 2 additional assessments.
That we don't currently
Right,
have for
but it
science.
is, okay, well, that's a lot of additional assessment in my view. If I'm doing an ELA beginning, middle, and end of year assessment with Acadians, and I'm in a 2nd grade classroom, and I'm doing a math beginning, middle, and end of year assessment with Acadians, and then I'm also doing, I guess, just in the interim part, in the middle of the year, I'm adding the NWEA piece. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's right.
As a 2nd grade teacher? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
And help me understand the difference of the information I'm going to gather from my middle of the year interim assessment in ELA or math from the NWEA tool than I will get from my Acadians middle of the year tool.
So the NWEA is really assessing, it's more of a predictive interim assessment. There's a number of benefits, but what it allows us to do is have a grounded kind of a data to be able to cross-check what teachers are building their formative assessments and what they're doing in their classes. One of the things that we run into a lot is teachers will come back and say, our Tier 1 assessments, 80% of our students are proficient on our Tier 1 assessments. So then you get to the end of the year and only 40% of our students are proficient. So having a valid, reliable assessment that is grounded, it's a vertical scale that goes K-12, it's the same scale for all students. Now what you can do as a teacher is you have checks along the year to be able to say, is what we're doing, are our interventions working? Are we seeing movement on a normed scale that gives you national percentiles both in achievement and in growth?
And you didn't feel like we were able to use our Acadians data in that way because it's not normed at that scale?
Yeah, it cannot replicate the results that we get back from an NWEA assessment that way. Also, if you think about Acadians, Acadians itself is adamant that this is just a screener, right? It's really it helps us identify for interventions and for formative assessment. NWEA is a different beast altogether, but it will help us again outside of the elementary with the secondary. They've really been requesting to be able to have some sort of a way for us to identify what students' achievement levels are, so we can create those interventions for them at secondary.
And so you don't
a great way of thinking of Acadians really is like I go into the emergency room and I'm bleeding out. I'm a little bit bleeding. I'm not bleeding. It's just a quick check, right? It's just the basic level of okay or not okay. So that screening is really like in the ER sense or medical field. That's the best way of thinking of that. It is not deep. It is you are really not okay. You're sort of okay. You're fine.
And in the math, does it parse?
Is the same thing?
Acadians in math, or was it the Intermath that would parse it into some of those different categories of data?
So in NWEA math replaces Intermath.
Correct, and it will break it down like concepts,
yes,
automaticity, etc. Same thing with ELA. Then will it give you, phonemic awareness or like different areas so that you know where to target your intervention or your support?
And NWEA is a much more broad level. It's not targeted.
Is it similar then to red, yellow, green?
No.
No.
Okay. No.
Similar.
Go ahead.
Think RISE.
Okay.
For NWEA. Think RISE.
NWEA is standards based.
Yeah.
Acadians is not standards based.
Right.
Acadians is just going to give you a screenshot, a snapshot of where your skill level is right now, but it doesn't tell you if the students are meeting the standards that are tied to the core at all. It doesn't tell us that.
But it won't parse out for you, for example. It's still up to a teacher to say, which of these following pieces do I need to look at in supporting the student?
Right, so with Acadians, you kind of have to be pretty close to that student's level for that assessment to help you. It basically it's yes, no, it's on or off, right? They're on grade level or below grade level, or they're just not meeting a specific target. And so then the teacher would have to have other tools to be able to say, I'm going to now do progress monitor below grade level, but how far below? They're going to have NWA would help serve them in identifying how much off grade level do I intervene, do I do my progress monitors.
How much time does, say, Acadians reading take to administer a single?
Depends on the grade, really, I think. That's what you're saying.
Are we asking for class time or per student? Because those are, so.
For me to administer it to one student, how much time am I spending per
about
student?
5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. There.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a perception out there that Acadians reading takes like over an hour per kid. And so what does that look like?
5 minutes, I would say, is very conservative. That's like
Yeah.
getting them set up. Once an assessor is really tuned into this, it's a very fast, especially the progress monitors. I mean, we're really trying to get them through in a minute on these assessments.
And who is administering the Acadians? Is that the teacher or is it an instructional assistant? Okay.
Same with NWEA.
Yes,
Be a teacher.
yeah, that would be the plan.
And then how long would an NWEA interim assessment take? And
NWEA.
can it be administered whole class or
Yep,
is it?
whole class, and NWA puts it between 45 minutes and 60 minutes for students to finish.
And they only do it interim, they don't have an end of year.
So interim you can think of as like benchmarks. So
Right.
middle or beginning, middle, and end of the year.
You still do it 3
Oh,
times.
I see, you're still doing all 3, okay.
Gives you different data.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I had a question about Power School.
Yes.
So I had a Title I coordinator, I am assuming after she was informed about Power School, that this new Power School would help when a student is transferred from one school in our school district to another school in our school district. Because from what she tells me right now, school number 1 has to fax over the student's records
Correct.
to school number 2. And so it takes time to do that, and it's archaic.
Correct, and so it will also follow kids from elementary to middle school, so that, I mean, this really ties in a lot of the at-risk, you know, making sure that people are identified along, and both of them are helpful. This is something that this early warning system is something that is required by the state for districts to have. This one just happens to fit within our current SIS that would allow us to tie together a lot of the data and provide a lot more information.
Yeah, she was hopeful that it would speed things up and make things faster and easier. Especially a student, she's
We're
pretty
very
nice on
helpful.
that.
It does. We're
But
very
one of the examples she gave me was a student who has behavioral problems, they don't have to wait a week for the fax to show up. And then all of a sudden they're scrambling to redo the assessment on this kid and do his behavioral thing, and the Power School, it will show up already, and then the plan that the school number 1 already had, school number 2 can start doing the plan that was already made for this student.
Correct. Yep, that is one of the purposes for going with these modules, is because it provides a lot more continuity of data and information.
So we have 3 minutes.
It'll take 2 seconds to go
okay.
through the rest of them.
All right.
So with the
Good job, Gina.
way to keep us on task. So we're in the process of doing bids right now for the makeup air units, which are in the kitchen, for Spring Creek, Amelia, and Independence. Amelia and Independence were already approved at the beginning of the year with the project. Spring Creek was left off inadvertently. So right now, the bids are coming in tomorrow, but what we're looking at preliminarily is $200,000 for that to be finished. It does need to be replaced to make sure we're staying on target with those pieces. The 4th one is a transformer, so they need to add a transformer for the concession stand. Generally, city utilities are not included in the construction bids that the contractors give us, because it goes within the district is the one who does that. And then the last one is the purchase of the portable that we are currently leasing up at Grandview, which is currently being used for a maintenance office for 3 of our employees, and well, 4 technically, and kind of their storage for all of their items.
And we want to purchase that because we're renting it right now.
We're leasing it at a cost of about $20,000 a year, and generally we keep them longer than what the amount is, and it was a good time to be able to remove all leases. So the other leased one is down in Lakeview. We no longer need that anymore, so they will be moving that this summer, and the second one at Lakeview that used to be at Sunset View is being demolished.
Okay, so we're anticipating that will save us money in the long run.
Correct. It will save us money in the long run.
On the transformers, that money is coming not out of construction?
Well, it'll come out of the capital fund, but
Okay.
it's not part of the bond. It'll be part of the construction.
That's
the
normal.
increase that
That's
we're
just
doing.
normal when we build something like that.
So I understand why it's a good idea to get rid of leases. I guess that feels like a commitment to keep it portable. Is that
But
what
it
we're saying?
doesn't-
Like it's
but
gonna
it's not
stay
for
a grand
school.
view?
Yeah, it's
I
not
know,
in a
for
school,
office
right.
space.
Yeah, so
Yep.
Is there a resale value to those? Should you decide to create a space and move those offices somewhere else down the road? Or
there
Yeah,
there
how
can
old it
be.
Just curious.
If there became a
Facebook Marketplace.
I don't know if
Portable.
Facebook Marketplace would be the
Come and
spot,
get
but-
it. Okay,
But
sorry.
yes.
I'm just curious about that because that feels like a commitment to keep an office there. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Devin. We will be voting on these in our 6 o'clock meeting, and then we'll go over upcoming board calendar items in the next meeting. So let's do, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move that we adjourn the study session.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned, and then we'll pick up in,
Are we staying here?
are we staying here?
No.